to stay healthy. So it's going to be a season of fist bumps then, from what we see.
I'd seen somewhere, I don't know how true it was, that there's a country that had banned shaking hands and hugs.
This is interestingly enough, the Catholic Diocese of Lagos, obviously in the season of Lent, and they would touch your head, right, with the sign of the cross. Yes. That's been banned, so it's going to be air blessings.
Wow!
Until things change.
Until we're clear.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it looks like this is, the best weapon is, it looks like we go back to the basics. I remember when we were growing up, the basics were very clear that, after you finish your business in the loo, wash your hands. But it looks like now we'll just have to upgrade that to wash your hands every how often? Right,
exactly. So it's going to be washing your hands often. The virus do's and don'ts that will save your life, essentially. And Mutuma Matthews talks about, poor access to hygiene information, mass panic, and inadequate preparation by health authorities might turn out to be the most dangerous aspects of the global coronavirus outbreak, which has affected almost 90,000 people, infected almost 90,000 people in 65 countries as of yesterday. And so this could be what could be the problem, not the virus itself, but all these, measures around it. China, of course, the epicenter, has the bulk of the cases, but it's now spreading fast in the rest of the world. I mean, I think as of yesterday now, we saw a confirmed case in Senegal.
Right.
And another one in Tunisia. So the US, of course, we saw more deaths yesterday.
There was an audio in Kenya that was doing rounds, which was eventually, said to be fake. Interesting how quickly fake news spreads. Yeah. Because apparently, I think there's some small little things that we can do ourselves a favor just to double check before we post or repost something. Because I remember when I got that audio, the first question I asked myself, why is it audio and not video?
Right, and who is this?
Yeah, who is this?
Having not given themselves any kind of credentials. Those should be the first questions we should ask. Who is this? Where were they speaking? Whom were they addressing?
Right.
But remember, if you do not have a culture of actually pausing
to think,
question and say, okay, fine. How true is this? Not social media, just any news you receive. Our culture seems to be, the more bizarre it sounds, the more likely you have to lap it up and consider it to be true. You see, right now, for instance, what isn't being spoken of with regards to the virus is this. Not very long ago, the U.S., the pronouncements coming from the U.S., from the Secretary of State and people in charge of health was that they were prepared, things were okay, things were under control. The U.S. is odd in this sense. We now have confirmed cases of 6 people who have died. Okay, but whereas in other parts of the country, business has actually gone to the dogs. In the U.S., it hasn't. It has actually rallied.
Right.
And things are actually, on the business front, things are actually looking good. Now, President Trump called the captains of industry, the pharmaceutical world, to the White House to have a discussion with them. And one of the things that they said was that it is likely that the earliest they can actually have a vaccine is in 18 months. And of course, they were asking if the government is willing to sort of like assist with funds. And he said, look, some of these pharmaceutical companies have enough money to even lend the state. So we don't really see why we should. But this is a different approach to this. Now, the other thing that is not spoken of is if you look at other such conditions that have been introduced into our universe, whether it's the MERS or the SARS, one of the reasons why they focus on containment is for a very simple reason. It doesn't spread. Okay? And the other reason is this: you contain it long enough, they have a shelf life. And a lot of this, their life is also dependent on the weather. If you look at something that is considered common in the Western world, influenza, it's during winter. Now, when winter comes to an end, so does influenza.
Right.
Yes. So these are the realities that one perhaps needs to bear in mind instead of the far-flung magical drama that is out there. But consider, if the reality that you have around you on a daily basis is one of hunger, one of hopelessness, then your mind will tend to move towards what seems a little magical and a little unreal.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think naturally you tend to be more onto survival mode, and anything that is more dramatic probably also just takes things off your mind. So you dwell a lot on that. You really don't think through it.
Yes.
Super. There's also, on page 2 of the Standard, 20 constituencies where the wealthy sleep. So I don't know, City, I don't know if you're part of the wealthy, but there's 20 constituencies apparently where there seems to be the wealthy. And of course, the debate has always been the wealthy and the poor and the gap that is there. But these constituencies, there's Kisumu County, there's Kajiado County, Nairobi County, Mombasa, Machakos, Kiambu, and Nyeri. So I don't know what the analysis for the wealthy is and why that's important. I'm sure many Kenyans probably would want to know when can this trickle down effect take place, and we sort of share the spoils.
Actually, if you look at the information that is given the Kenya National Bureau of Standards and what they consider, they don't. You read the article. One of the things that they look at is perhaps the type of buildings that people have, okay? But they don't actually go beyond what we call traditional indicators of wealth. You see, in this country, people consider that if you own a car, you're wealthy. A car by its very nature depreciates with every passing day, so it's not a very solid.
It's actually a liability. It's not an asset.
In many ways, yes.
Yes.
A house, yes, is an asset. Land, yes, is an asset. But if you look at land as an asset, very many Kenyans have land. You can call it ancestral land, you can call it but they have land. One may argue that the value is not as high as you would see in the urban areas. I would like a little more details on this particular subject and all the indicators that they use to determine whether someone is wealthy or not. There are places where owning a radio is a sign of wealth.
It's wealth, right. Of course.
We still have places where having more than one wife is a sign of wealth.
And of course, you would find other places where, people who own, several heads of cattle would find that they were more wealthy than people who profess to own, a fleet of vehicles, for example. And you would not even be able to compare. Speaking of wealth and loss of wealth, Kenya Ports Authority MD Daniel Manduku was held overnight in probe over allocation of space at the inland container depot. Of course, we talked about it a couple of months ago when we talked about, KPA having not been dogged by the scandal that seemed to have been rife from other state corporations. But it seems that the axe has fallen in this case. Manduku and KRA Customs Commissioner Safari are expected in court today to face 7 charges, including abuse of office. KPA Managing Director Daniel Manduku has been arrested as detectives investigate cargo clearance at the inland container depot in Nairobi. He was arrested alongside KRA Commissioner for Customs Kevin Safari. They were taken into the Directorate of Criminal Investigations for processing ahead of their appearance in court today. They're picked in Nairobi and they're expected to face at least 7 charges in relation to allocation of space for cargo from Mombasa at the ICD. And of course, they're amongst several other officials under investigation after allocation of space. He's accused to have been between March 21st and June 14th last year, jointly with others, connived to gazette Nairobi Inland Cargo Terminal as a KPA peripheral facility. So it seems that the axe continues to fall.
Well, actually, there was 2,100 square meters, which was actually Kenya Railway land also, and it was subdivided into 9 zones, and this was awarded to 8 contractors. But of interest, it doesn't stop there. It says that many of these companies were paid in full, and yet the work was not completed. 1. 2, the Kisumu rehabilitation project has been thrown into this, and they say 800 million has been spent on it, and yet the work was projected to cost 100 million. There's a small issue of concrete barriers that they're building, and known cost on the market is at 10,000 each, and yet they're bought for 79,000 Kenyan shillings each. Yes.
Well, interesting how our QA, our quantity surveys, and the amount that is spent even on things that are genuinely being done is overpriced.
Yes, it
so
is.
there you go. So I think corruption, when we talk about corruption, let's not even call it corruption. Stealing, the amount of stealing that goes on in this country is completely unexcusable. And of course, like you say, the axe seems to be falling, and Manduku at this point in time is the person of interest.
Yes, and the company that received the least amount of money, something called Kites Technical, 33 million, and received the most was Panama Construction, 205 million Kenyan shillings.
Of course, the question is that, when these things are being done, previously there was no kind of, nobody was watching. The watchdog really, kind of either turned a blind eye, or we can say, if we want to live in fantasy land, that they really didn't know what was going on. But in this case, it seems that the eye is probing and going a little bit deeper in terms of this. Those who thought things that they did previously that they would go scot-free on, it seems that the arm of the law now is stretching quite far.
But there's a thread and a trend here. If you look at the problems that are now dogging Kenya Ports Authority, they're not dissimilar to the sort of problems that dogged the pipeline. They're not dissimilar to the problems that have dogged Kenya Power. And these are entities that actually have a virtual monopoly.
Absolutely.
They don't actually have competition for what they do.
Of course, we're looking at more of that in a bit. We're going to take a look at what's going on with the weather right now around the country and, of course, in different parts of the world. This is a Situation Room in joint collaboration with KTN News, a Morning Express with Mikey Tonga. My name is Ndoko, here with CT Muga. We'll take a look at the weather and we'll be back in a bit.
Chilled Spice.
Mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi this morning at 17. 87.9. And lows of 16. 16 degrees in Nakuru as well, with mostly cloudy conditions through the day, looking at a low of 15. Partly cloudy in Eldoret and rain expected later with highs of 24. Rain expected later in Nyeri as well with highs of 26, currently standing at 16 with mostly cloudy conditions. In Kisumu, mostly cloudy this morning with rain expected later, highs of 28. And in Mombasa, it's a cloudy day. Partly cloudy conditions to follow later, currently at 27 degrees with highs of 33. In Malindi, cloudy conditions as well. It's going to open up into partly cloudy conditions later on with highs of 32 and lows of 27. In Dar es Salaam, it's cloudy as well. It's raining later, highs of 32 and lows of 24. In Kampala, cloudy conditions as well, and the rain will open up there as well with highs of 27 and lows of 20. Further afield in Lagos, light thunderstorms and rain expected through the day with highs of 34 and lows of 26. Take a quick peek into Europe. In London at 3 degrees this morning, clear skies, partly cloudy conditions to follow with highs of 9 and lows of 1. It's 12 degrees in New York, partly cloudy conditions, rain to follow later with highs of 14 and lows of 9. And rounded out in Paris at 3 degrees with clear skies, light showers expected later with highs of 9 and lows of 2.
And
Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
This morning, right here in the studio with me, Nduoko, CT Muga and Mike Gitonga, as we collaborate, of course, with KTN News on the Morning Express. And as we're looking at what's going on in the world, CT, today's nugget of wisdom.
Why I laugh and why I smile is for a very simple reason. That today's nugget of wisdom is something that most people would not consider a nugget of wisdom. But it actually says something very simple, that anyone who has watched the dance of a millipede and considers this important has not seen the dance of a snake.
Wow, do you wanna elaborate that a little bit?
I will, but what makes it interesting is I state it, then I keep quiet, and then I leave you wondering. It's a tool called suspense.
And then let it land.
It works. So somewhere along the way, I will talk about it a little more and expand a little more. And towards the end of the show, I will explain it. And I'll also tell you its origin.
All right. Sounds good to me.
this is to keep you tuned in.
This is okay. No, it sounds good to me, and it definitely, evokes interest on my part, because a millipede and a snake, how they dance is an interesting thing. But still, looking at what's making headlines, an interesting story which I think was doing rounds on social media yesterday is one of a young man whose gift has definitely, put him on an international spotlight. And this is a young man who drew Steve Harvey, and out of social media, and just shows you the power of social media, he managed to reach out to, Steve Harvey, and apparently he has even invited him to Kenya.
This is true.
Yeah, so whether he's going to honor the invite or not, what we do know is that Steve Harvey, of course, has loved his piece of art and has requested to meet him. He wanted to meet him in Johannesburg, but according to the young man, he's like, no, I'm actually not too far from Joburg. And of course, I'm
in Kenya.
Africa is, just literally, we are streets away.
4 hours away.
4 hours away. So if you're coming to Joburg, why not just drop into Kenya and, come pick your, piece of art.
Portrait, yes.
Your portrait.
It's interesting because once he responded, he said, well, I'm going to Johannesburg and I'll be in Botswana, so maybe we can link up.
I don't know if you've ever had to travel and somebody asks you, are you going to New York? I have a friend in New York. And, somebody kind of thinks sometimes it's
I know a Kenyan in New York.
Yeah, I know a Kenyan in New York. Do you think you could reach out to them?
Mike, you're being specific. You just need to mention the U.S.
Oh, yes.
And someone says, U.S. Okay.
Oh, I have a friend in the U.S.
In fact, and you ask where? I said, no, somewhere in the U.S. And it's called so-and-so. When you get there, just ask. Say, hey.
So it looks like Steve Harvey had the same thing. It's like, oh, this guy's in Kenya. You know what? I'll be in Botswana and Johannesburg. So, hey, why don't you just, take a bus ride and, come down and let's hook up and I take my piece of art.
But you do know that in the West, where the entire continent is referred to as one country. Oh, you come from Africa. You say... Yes, but it's a little more complex than
that.
Oh, yeah, and they'll ask you something like, do you all speak Swahili in Africa? Or do you speak African?
Do you speak African? That's the thing. That one, I think...
these questions, if you don't pause and think about it, they actually are very illuminating, because it points to the understanding that individual has of your continent and where you come from. And remember also...
Or in this case, lack of.
Yes, but also where they come from, it's the U.S., and then you have these states, but you come from the U.S.
The
first.
U.S.
Right.
Now, remember that very many people have knowledge, not just of the state they come from, but probably of the region or the town. They're so self-sufficient that they have no need or interest
to step out.
to know what else happens in the rest of that particular state. Now, we, on the other hand, have open minds, one, because of our education, but also we have this need to look for greener
pastures.
Yes. So we keep an extremely open mind. Yes.
Right.
Now, and our education system opens that mind because you know about other parts of the world because you're taught in school.
And I wonder if that has a part it plays in terms of not finding opportunities, because when your mind is so fixed on looking for opportunities elsewhere, you cease to look at the ones near you.
Unfortunately, if you look at the opportunities that present themselves to us, they also present themselves with a little caveat. It's called complication. Who do you know?
Who do you know?
And who can, of course,
yes, and where you
can hook you up.
Right.
Yes.
But is that always the case? We do have cases of people who've actually made it within the environment without necessarily knowing somebody, where they've, applied the ethos of hard work.
It, for the longest time, that really worked. And it was the norm. But unfortunately, it isn't always the norm. And if you come from a community that is considered perhaps not marginalized, but marginal in terms of numbers, then the narrative and the sentiment that is felt is that you will not be prioritized. Now, this is to put it as politely as I possibly
As you
can.
possibly
Oh,
can.
yes, that is true. And even if we look at our culture, sometimes that does happen depending on whether you're firstborn or lastborn. Your priorities may be different. Whether you're male or female,
Yes.
your priorities may be different. So, of course, even societally, you'll find that if you don't come from the right community or
Yes.
the right, lineage, then unfortunately you're disenfranchised.
Of course.
Yes. Even within a community that perhaps is born together by linguistic similarities, you'll find again, as you say correctly, if your family name doesn't resonate with something that people consider to be favorable, you are already disadvantaged.
Yeah.
So now these are the norms, but when they take center stage, then people feel that going to a place where that doesn't matter may provide a better option for them. Yes.
True.
Oh, of course. Then you can be, one of the many fish in the sea, and you all have opportunity,
Yes.
At the same time.
And your
or on the
ability
same
is
place.
what will stand you in good
yeah.
stead.
And in
Yes.
this case, it's not. It's merit, really, that will
Merit, yeah.
that will position you as opposed to whom you know. Speaking of whom you know, court blocks the arrest of the KQ whistleblower and orders his reinstatement, which, as I see already, might be throwing him back into shark waters. A court has stopped the authorities from arresting or prosecuting a security chief at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, accused of filming and sharing a video of a Chinese airline that landed last week with 239 passengers. Justice Weldon Korir also ordered Kenya Airways to reinstate Mr. Gira Ali, who had been suspended for recording the video of China Southern Airline on Wednesday last week, leading to a public uproar. He made the orders yesterday after Ali, an assistant security agent, moved to court complaining that he was being targeted. So now they've stopped anyone from arresting or prosecuting him, and if they've also said he must be reinstated, essentially he must go back to work.
What was he being prosecuted for in the first place?
Well, this was the thing that he took. First of all, the charges that were brought, taking video at the airport. He was not authorized to do so.
It's a restricted area.
It's a restricted area.
And
First
this
of all,
is not permissible.
Exactly.
Okay. One.
Secondly, without then the authorities of his direct employer, which is KQ, Kenya Airways, at this point, and then sharing this information, which quote unquote he had gotten illegally, and then sharing the information to the wider public, which then put the wider public in a state of uproar and panic. In terms of 239 passengers off this plane. Essentially, what does that mean? The state or the nation would not have gone into panic had he not shared this video. This is what KQ is contending. And of course, they seem to be keen on punishing the applicant for exposing the nation a threat to their lives, while there was a directive from the same officers suspending aircrafts from China. This, of course, is the statement that kind of just clicks everything together. And so now the High Court says, number one, you must reinstate him. You will not prosecute him. And he can go back to work. But like I said, he's going back into shark-infested waters in this case, because how is that?
Yeah, that is a court order, and hopefully it's going to be obeyed. But of course, practically, how do you go back to work?
Go back and do his job?
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of imagine that he'll be a hero to some, but of course there are those who feel that he exposed them, and as a result, must be, face some punitive action.
Do you remember a time when a certain gentleman by the name of John Githongo exposed certain malpractices within the government of Kenya?
And he asked people to go through.
Yes.
Go through.
Yeah, you would assume that this was a good thing.
Right.
Okay. How was he treated?
Pariah. Persona non grata, of course.
So you ask yourself, wait. This is his job.
He was helping us.
This is what he's supposed to do. So did we give him this job so that he wouldn't do it? And when he does do his job, then why do we demonize him? Oh, that man was demonized. So remember, again, in this very studio, we have said that one of the things that Kenyans do well in is being duplicitous. On the one hand, you say that you would like change and you are anti certain negative things within the society, but your actions speak otherwise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what they say? They say that if you want to kill a dog, give it a bad name. So with your nuggets of wisdom. So maybe you might want to explain that at the end. Yeah. And it looks like for him, he's already being given a bad name. So God knows what will happen, in the end of that. He might lose his job. Or even if he doesn't lose his job by being fired, the environment can be such that it's so hostile that you cannot work. You cannot deliver.
Mike, whistleblowers, we are told, are protected in this country. I will take the view that indeed they may be protected, because I don't know much about the protection that involves whistleblowers. But what has been in the public domain, whistleblowing in this country is dangerous to your health.
Very dangerous. Might actually be worse than coronavirus for him.
For him.
There you go.
The interesting part about this is, though, he seems to have the support of the nation behind him, is that people wanted to know what was really going on. And he was able to expose this. So, I mean, if you just look at social media and what happened immediately, he posted the letter of his suspension. Social media was ablaze, and people were asking questions in terms of how could they do this, when essentially what he was doing is protecting people by exposing this. So it'd be interesting to see how all of that turns out.
And
We're going to take a look at the traffic and see what's happening on our roads this morning. We come back and discuss. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We're looking at what's going on in the papers and what's happening in the country and, of course, around the world. We'll take a look at traffic and come back and continue with this discussion. Let's take a look at the things this Tuesday morning. Thika Road already from Allsops seems to be crazy this morning. Not as smooth as we would envision it to be. All the way from Allsops, it's bumper to bumper, taking us very slowly towards the city centre. And as we come down, of course, remembering today that there's some construction that's going on the footbridges, so that takes some time to sort out. We take a look also on Mombasa Road as far back as the Way Bridge this morning. It's crawling along very, very slowly. And remember that today being the 3rd of March, some roads in industrial area will be closed as they're working on construction there. So that will affect some parts of Enterprise Road, Likoni Road, and getting your way into the city might not be very interesting. Waiyaki Way towards Kino is bumper to bumper, very slow. The 87 is an option for now. Remembering that coming off Mombasa Road, the eastern and southern bypasses are options for you as well. Pangani Tunnel towards the city centre, no traffic whatsoever. The highway is so clear. So let's see what it looks like in a short while. Yet to enter into traffic hour officially. We'll take a look at what's happening on Langata Road and Ngong Road in a very short while. If you see anything that we need to know about, give us a call or send us a message. Spice FM KE is how you can reach us on Twitter. We'll take a look at how things change in a bit.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
Done right. And coming to you live from
94.4
Spice FM, it's convergence between Morning Express and the Situation Room. And of course, looking at what's making headlines this morning. Remember, you can also get us on www.spicefm.co.ke. And don't miss out on what's happening. So, of course, we've been looking at what's making headlines on the dailies. But two things I'd like to pick out on the power of social media. We have one where a gentleman who is an artist has basically got himself a world platform, so to speak, through his art and social media. But we also have a KQ worker who was going to face the axe or very difficult times. But because of social media, he may actually be reinstated and continue to work. So for me, I'd like to look at it from a positive perspective. There is very positive power of social media when used properly.
When used properly, this is true. Imagine 10 years ago, easily, we would never have heard about this fellow. Mm-hmm. He would have been suspended, gone, done.
Yeah,
Nobody would have asked
deal.
any
probably
questions.
Would have only the family would have known what happened,
right.
And they would complain, and that would be the end of it. But here we are now. We can discuss, and he probably has his job back as a result of social media. So there is a positive side to social media.
Oh, there's a lot that is positive about social media. But as I said, that's one side of the coin, isn't it?
Oh yes. And of course, I guess the thing to do is to weigh which is heavier, the negative or the positive. And there's a lot of negative out there as well. Yeah, but anyway, looking at what's making headlines.
Of course, the impending impeachment of Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko hangs in the balance. Yesterday, of course, a judge declined to allow or disallow ward representatives from debating the motion scheduled to be tabled today. So yesterday, according to this injunction, as it were, they couldn't have a discussion about this at all. The motion, of course, comes out today. Justice Brian Onyanga of the Employment and Labour Relations Court said the mover of the motion, who is Mr. Peter Imwatok, must comply with the laid down procedures to have it tabled on the floor of the House. And I think coming through all of this, most recently, even with the Kiambu governor impeachment case, a lot of this now pointed to process and procedure and saying, the procedure must be followed. The right process must be followed. And we see the law of being very finicky on that point and saying, you know what? if anything, we're going to follow due process as far as that's concerned. Of course, ruling on the application to have the debate stopped, the judge said the proposed motion should stand adjourned except in strict compliance of the standing orders. So the governor had complained that the impending impeachment was illegal as he had not been served with documents containing the allegation levied against him. And so what we see now is that the proposed impeachment motion against the applicant is adjourned and shall not proceed except in compliance with standing orders.
But what I find interesting is this. That's the court, straightforward. We understand what they're saying. But again, it's being reported that during the meeting, Mr. Kenyatta convinced the MCAs that an impeachment motion would lead to a by-election, which would be bad for the country given its limited financial resources. So again, this debate of the president wading in to help Sonko has come up. And yet, there isn't sufficient evidence to point to the simple thing that he actually said, do not try and impeach the guy.
Well, I don't think he said don't try and impeach the guy, but of course, I mean, coming out of that meeting, the sentiment, or rather the thought was that he gave a nudge towards encouraging them not to go towards impeachment.
In other words,
and this is how we see it. This is the second time that we've seen it being reported over the weekend and then again in the new week.
Right, and the thing is, I think it's very cleverly put in terms of, look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture here is, do we want service delivery to the people of Nairobi, or do we just simply want to have Sonko removed because that's what needs to be done and that's what you guys want to do? So I think it's a clever way of getting the point across that leave Sonko to be Sonko as governor with no clout, no power to do anything, but let's deliver to the people of Nairobi. Question is, will that translate to delivery? And has the national government got the capacity? And of course, there is now the question of, now that, first of all, this was done without due process, what brought to the conclusion that these are the functions we're going to give to national government? Who decided that behalf of Nairobi?
You see, the real discussion that I think has been highlighted by this court ruling about process should also be applied to the process by which the government actually got into transferring these powers. Our constitution allows for it. But again, due process.
Yes, public participation.
Yes, to be
comes into play.
Just for starters. Now, that question has not been fully answered. Has due process been followed? So you want to right a situation by beginning the entire process on a wrong footing.
And what stops you from going in a little bit further and doing things not according to process if we allow that small bit of, process not to be followed?
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so of course that leaves us Kenyans wondering, how do you want this to run? Again, there's the question of national government has not done that well. Not even not done that well. That's, I think, an understatement. But they have mismanaged funds very much. So why give them more funds which are supposed to be, bringing services closer to the people?
I think this entire exercise is supposed to help bail out KRA because the economy of the county of Nairobi is enormous. I mean, we've had figures during the Kidero era. It was alleged that the county revenue collection was up to 14 billion, right? But again, against what? I have never heard I've never read any documentation that tells me or indicates in details out of the 130 revenue streams that the county has, what it is that they can optimize, what it is that is realistically expected from these revenue streams. You don't hear it. 14 billion just thrown into the arena as a revenue collected, that means nothing. We have to know what the capability is so that when you're talking figures, you have something to compare it with, so this is the target that we have either surpassed or this is a target we need to get to.
Okay. Speaking of targets, I mean, I think that the target that was set for KRA in the last couple of weeks that we saw could lend credence to this argument, CT, in the sense that 800 billion shillings is what they're looking for in the next 6 months, because we understand that 6 trillion shillings, 6.2, is what they needed to get by the end of 2021. And we're looking at that calendar year. 800 million shillings.
But you see, it also introduces a new discussion. These budgets that KRA keep giving us, are they realistic?
It just seems impossible for them to be able to gather when we see these numbers.
Just because we are told this is what they need, is it realistic? Just because Treasury decides to come up with a budget and gives you figures, is it realistic?
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Yeah, it needs to be audited and questioned.
Yes.
And but Nairobi City definitely, of course, there's also been the argument as to why Nairobi City is given a status, or rather Nairobi County is given a status like every other county, yet it is obviously a huge contributor to KRA. So, of course, there's that discussion also
Of
going
course, but then again, I see Nairobi as a pie that everybody wants a piece of. And if we're going to then look towards who wants control of, in this case, the money. And if you look at the key services that were then handed over to the national government, who, yes, their scorecard in making things work has been poor at best previously. Dismal, all right. I was trying to be polite, but okay, let's go with dismal. It doesn't seem that they're going to be able to do a fantastic job in cleaning that up either.
No, they're not.
You know what is even trickier, as we said yesterday, is that revenue collection in what you call a former municipality and which is now a county is not as straightforward as it appears. There are things which are straightforward. They're the normal levies, they're the normal licenses, straightforward. There are others which require certain expertise. Again, you are being told that KRA, and this isn't the first time, by the way, that KRA has tried to enter this foray of collecting monies for the counties. They tried with the county of Kisumu. Banks have also tried to get into that. Unfortunately, one doesn't know or read of any success rate when it comes to some of these things.
Right.
So you ask the fundamental question. That's why I said the most likely beneficiary of this is likely to be KRA.
KRA.
Yes.
Right, so 11 MPs who secretly travelled to Somalia set to know their fate today. Of course, secretly, like we said, they didn't crawl through some borderline tunnel. They got onto a plane and they went to Somalia. So I don't know how secret this was. Of course, we saw again through social media yesterday certain members of parliament talking about the fact that why is there suddenly this uproar when we had asked, and suddenly now the Somali government is listening to us. 11 Kenyan MPs from the northeastern region who secretly traveled to Somalia on Saturday will know their fate today. They might be investigated for breaching privileges bestowed on them as state officers. If lucky, they will be pardoned. National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi is expected to make a communication on the conduct of the MPs in the afternoon when the House resumes its sittings. The communication will likely center around Kenya's diplomatic relations with foreign nations. Of course, we know that diplomatic relations with Somalia right now are a bit strained. We are discussing to see how to handle the matter, according to Muturi. They confirmed on Sunday that the MPs did not seek clearance before they flew to Somalia, a country that has become hostile to Kenya's interests, going by the pronouncements of its senior government officials and the threat of Al-Shabaab.
What is our quarrel with Somalia?
Go.
Yes, I mean, there must be a quarrel. What is the quarrel? Look, Somalia is divided into clans. It's quite simple. It's not even complicated. And even if you look at the problem, the wars that they have within Somalia, they are clan wars, just on a much larger scale. Now, it's clear and it appears that the Kenya government seems to support one of those clans, the ones who perhaps border Kenya. Now, if you're seen to support one clan, what is guaranteed, what is certain is that the clan that doesn't get along with that particular clan will not get along with you.
Right.
And from what we read and see, these are communities that take vendettas and enmity seriously.
Very, very seriously. But then the question, of course, then would be for these members of parliament who traveled, which clan are they supporting and why?
The point is, if you read what was in yesterday's papers, there was the issue of, one, the war in Somalia, unresolved, our participation. Should we have involved ourselves as we did? Phase one. Phase two, the business that went with the war, whether it is charcoal,
or arms,
or just food products that would use Kismayu as a route, to bring things to
Kenya.
Those are debates that are ongoing, and the reality and the truth about it is neither here nor there. All right? That's number two. Number three, remember, if you have a situation where the clans are already in conflict, it has nothing to do with Kenya, and you are seen to support one particular clan, even if you claim that this is to fight Al-Shabaab, the truth of the matter is that you are not going to be making friends. Not just with one person, but you're going to...
The whole...
Yes, to the other people will say, because you will present yourself as someone who's favoring one community. Then, in my opinion, there's yet another issue. You will find that these clan issues also roll over into Kenya, because Kenyans who are of Somali origin belong to these clans that are resident in Somalia. To understand it, you need to look at the Oromo in Ethiopia and the Borana in Kenya. Same people. So
Different countries.
yes, same people. So in the same way, there are people whose numbers are many in Kenya, and yet they belong to communities that are resident in Somali. So here we are, we've gone and put ourselves smack in the middle
of all of
perhaps
this.
a disagreement that had absolutely nothing to do with us.
Wow. That makes it sound very simply put, but very complex, when it comes to finding where the actual issue and the solution is. So, of course, the question is, what happens to the members of parliament? That remains to be seen.
It remains to be seen and heard this afternoon. I guess we'll have an opportunity to hear that. But of course, we're looking for things as serious as espionage or spying with a foreign nation or for a foreign nation. And these are some of the things that could be levied against them. Unfortunately, that's what we'll be looking at. We're going to take a break right now. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, taking a look at what's happening in the papers. We'll be back in a bit.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM 102.5 Spice FM Kisumu. Breathing life into the 80s. 94.4 Spice FM Nairobi. Breathing life into the 90s. 94.4 Spice FM Nairobi.
You tuned in to Spice FM. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, live in Nairobi on 94.4. If you're tuning in from Mombasa on 87.9, it's 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret on 96.7, Nyeri on 90.9, Kisumu on 102.5, and Malindi on 97.7. The live stream's up on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Spice FM KE is how you can reach us. We are in the studio this morning, of course, joint collaboration with KTN News, The Morning Express, Mike Tonga, Siti Muga, and myself, Ndwoko, and taking a look at what is going on in the news, or of course in the country and around the world. What do you have, Siti?
Well, let me tell you what I have, or should I begin with what I don't have?
Okay.
Oh, Around the World. Do you remember this book by Alexander Duma? Around the World in how many days?
80. That was 80 days, yes.
Around the world in 80 days.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did he prove that was possible?
I think it was a story in between. I don't think we ever got to around the world, and if it was actually 80 days or...
We never did confirm.
We never did confirm.
It's something that I want us to look at. It's concerning and it's disturbing. We talk about our preparedness as a country for the coronavirus, and yet, if you look at page 3, no cash for drugs to combat COVID-19. Did you see that one?
I did. I tried to ignore it, but clearly...
I actually cannot ignore it.
I felt a bit taken aback.
You see, I would like to go around the world and discuss what's happening in the world, but this concerns me because you cannot talk about the fight against the COVID-19 and yet the money to actually provide supplies that would enable this fight to actually be a fight has not been provided. So all the preparedness, when you talk about their rooms in Kenyatta, their rooms in Bagathi, it means nothing. If we do not have the money to buy the drugs, even though those KEMSA has clearly stated they understand and they know what needs to be provided, we have manufacturers locally who can provide some of those things, and they have actually categorically stated they can and given timetables. But in the absence of that money, it cannot be done. Yes. Now, if you just pause for a single second and ask yourself, all right, we budget for these things. This one clearly wasn't thought of. But even when you budget, usually the budget is for an entire year, is it not? So even within the same ministry, is it not possible to determine that this is money that we set for this, but it hasn't been spent because we don't need to spend it until probably May? Is it not possible to say, okay, why don't we divert this money? You may require Parliament to give you approval, but this is an emergency.
Absolutely.
WHO has declared an emergency, even if it means shifting money from a different ministry. Again, if you need Parliament's approval, why not? This is an emergency.
It is, but unfortunately, CT, we seem to work on, last minute. We kind of chase things instead of thinking ahead. Because trust me, if we found, God forbid, but if we found several cases of COVID-19 in Kenya, that money will be made available ASAP. However, the problem we have, I think, is in planning, such that this is now when an executive order has come out for there to be centers, ready should there be any coronavirus. And this was out of pressure. It's probably because of that, aircraft that landed and people were like, yeah, when we allow these Chinese guys or whatever these guys are coming from into the country, what risk are we putting ourselves at? So I think our issue is largely based on planning.
But
Well,
just
the money may be there.
I think we plan very well. I think
planning,
we
we plan.
I think we do it very, very, very
But
well.
for the wrong things?
no.
Implementation is where all of this falls apart. And I have to ask myself at the same time, we waited, or rather the ministries involved, the individuals involved waited until there was this executive order. I would have thought that with the way the world was going, literally the world, that they would have said, you know what, guys, even here in our pockets where we are supposed to be doing this job, we would have been prepared to a certain level, or we'd have put things in place to make sure that we're dealing with this thing at a certain level. But everybody just kind of sat back in their lounge chairs under the sun with the pina colada and never really thought about what was going on until the president said, you know what, guys, it's here. We need to do something about it.
And even by the time the president Sundu was saying that, remember, it is out of pressure. It is out of pressure, literally. People saying, are we really prepared as a country? They were all enjoying. I mean, I remember watching Rochelle Omamo being, questioned by Senate, and her answers literally wanted to go under the table because she was like, I don't know where these guys have come from. They could have come from India. They could have come from China. They could have come from Kisumu. And I'm like, wait. Are these
kidding?
the guys? Yeah, I mean, are you kidding? Are we really talking about the same risk of coronavirus that I'm thinking about and I've read about? So that's why I speak to planning in the sense that we are reactive. We are never proactive.
You know, if you really want to understand the seriousness of this, even the rooms that you're told are ready are not. We are being told they'll be ready by Friday this week. Now, the initial statement, we have quarantine, they're ready. Now, when this story comes up, not quite ready, but by Friday, they'll be ready. But what to me is of interest, and this is what I must emphasize, we read in the papers, we hear of government statements, we hear the Ministry of Health coming in. Now, we know for a fact that the people who are actually going to be involved in actually ensuring that people stay well, or if they have the virus, ensure that they remain alive. Doctors, nurses, clinical officers, pharmacists, lab techs. These are the people. Do you read anywhere where the government has actually involved the associations of these medical individuals? You do not. Do you hear of the government having brought in a serious discussion with the Kenya Medical Association to have this discussion continued? You do not. Do you hear them having brought in the Association of Lab Technicians? You do not. Do you hear them talking to the council that deals with nurses? You do not. And if I mention any other organization that is directly related to medical care, do you hear them having brought in Kenya Medical Research Institute? You do not. So if you do not hear of these discussions, let's take the really wildly optimistic view that the discussions are going on quietly and we don't know. But don't you think that the country would be far more encouraged if they heard that indeed the government is talking to the Kenya Medical Research Institute, the government is talking to the medical school at the University of Nairobi, is talking to all these medical associations, Kenya Medical Association, the Lab Tech Association.
That's what a joint collaboration would be.
Would one feel okay? Now,
something is being done.
We have the medical fraternity.
We have experts
joining hands to see how this can be done. But messaging that is constantly coming from bureaucrats in the Ministry of Health, a complete waste of time.
A complete waste of time,
utter waste
unfortunately. Unfortunately, a complete waste of time, because we see that, here we are, even with the edict that was given on Friday, right? Until today, Tuesday, I have to ask, what has changed? And do we feel the temperature of the people in the country, if that only, has it calmed down? Or are people still at a heightened state because they don't feel that anything really has been done?
It's the same attitude we saw with locusts, same attitude we saw with the flooding. The flooding, the consequences are not even being talked about, but they're there. There are schools, the people haven't gone back to school yet because the schools, the classes were washed away.
Absolutely.
We have cases where you can't go to the school because people who had been displaced are in those schools. Have we heard of what the government has done to ensure that these situations have been resolved? We haven't heard, even if they have done so. We have locusts. The locusts have not gone anywhere. And they're multiplying.
Interesting that you say that, because we talked about this, and for me, it gets my goat, because we say aerial spraying for insects. Do you realize what is happening now? Rather, aerial spraying for locusts. What has happened now is that the aerial spraying then has killed the other insects, that are necessary for things like pollination of fruit trees and other kinds of trees that you actually require in a habitat or ecosystem to get it going or keep it moving as an environment. So this now is a byproduct of this aerial spraying, which we were discouraged from in the very beginning.
From the beginning.
To use ground spraying as a measure.
One, to stop the breeding so that they don't multiply, and then to ensure that it's not just them that you inhibit. You stop them multiplying and you also reduce the numbers. Now, surely that's simple arithmetic.
And guess what? If the fact that we even have that in the news today does not stop us from aerial spraying. We're still going ahead with aerial spraying, and we'll continue until we realize that things are completely gone haywire. And that's why I say, for me, we really do not think ahead. We have a very myopic view of everything, literally, that we do as a country, unfortunately.
Yeah. And this is the way that we continue to go with this over and over and over again. It's interesting that imports from China also have fallen 58 billion shillings, of course, because of coronavirus. And we look at this as a medical issue, but it goes beyond that, affecting the economy, affecting lives on a global scale. So it's a little bit more serious than sometimes we want to lend credence to. At this point, got to say goodbye, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, joining us from the Morning Express today on KTN. It's been great as usual. We continue, of course, with the conversation tomorrow.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be right here on Spice FM. And yes, let's do this again tomorrow.
Asante sana. Right, the conversation does continue right here on Spice FM as we continue. It is World Wildlife Day. We will be continuing with that as we keep talking, and let's see what we can do in terms of conservation of our wildlife. We'll be talking about that as we go along, continuing with what we see in the papers, and we'll be back in a short while. Don't do that. I keep telling you, there are 3 minutes left. Why do you do that? No, it's still enough for him to come. No, I'm not talking to you. You will come here and talk to me. I'm not talking to you. I don't know why, CT, I don't know why he does that. Now you've stopped us at 2 minutes to 7 because Mike needs to go. I don't know.
Spice FM, Nakuru. This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching
The
up,
only way to start
not
your
down.
day. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. You are tuned in on 94.4 in Nairobi. Live stream is up on Spice FM KE on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. My name is Ndu Oko in the studio this morning with C.T. Muga, and of course, taking in conversations and talking about what is going on in our world today. It is World Wildlife Day today, and very important in the world calendar in terms of conservation or of our wildlife, and not just that, but looking at ecosystems and how priority needs to be given and taken. We had Millennium Development Goals at some point. After they were said to have been crossed, we then went on to what were then the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. And looking at World Wildlife Day, and then the edict that was then, or rather the suggestions that were then made across nations, was that we were looking at a world where conservation of wildlife then became a priority, and to make sure that we had in place for nations, regardless of who they were or where they were, to look at nature being protected. Because as they say, nature would always fight back. And in the studio, of course, this morning we're joined by Trix Ngado from the Morning Express. Trix, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Why are you laughing, City?
What option do I have?
Yeah.
Give me the options. Laugh, don't laugh, smile,
cry.
don't smile. Good
Yeah.
morning.
Good morning.
Right. So, I mean, as we continue with that, of course, and then looking at the protectionism that is required then by very many nations to make sure that, we are protecting wildlife. It has come to the notion of many that it is an important thing, but in many cases has been left on the side, or rather on the back burner as far as things need to be done. But it is very clear that a lot of nations don't take this as a priority because what are we going to deal with? Are we dealing with feeding millions of people? Are we dealing with putting infrastructure in place? Are we dealing with the development of nations? Especially when we want to look at what CT often calls, what did you call, backwater, third world, dark nations?
No.
How many adjectives did you apply to this?
No, never dark.
Never dark.
It's with third world banana republic.
Third world banana republics, right?
Yeah.
So with the priorities that they have, of course, putting a lot of these things in place, it means that, a lot of times things like the conservation of wildlife, for example, is not what comes into play. And it's not on the top of the agenda, unfortunately. Many other things take the precedent.
Yeah.
But now when we're looking at nature and conserving nature and some of the things that we've been told by experts over time that, in the next 50 years or so, we're not going to have it as we see it. We're not going to have, water in abundance as we see it today. We're not going to have the wildlife, which of course is necessary for the balance of ecosystems around the world as we have it today. So a day like this is not to only celebrate the wildlife, but of course to put things in place that make sure that we have them around for the next, many years. And of course, to look at the fact that we often encroach on those ecosystems as human beings, as developing economies, as developing cities, without taking that into consideration. And as we mark this today, it means that we should then take that into consideration. The question has come many times that do we shelve development of nations? Do we shelve development of cities then at the request of the conservation, for example, of nature and of wildlife and of things like this? Where do we find the balance? And I'm saying today, as we mark this day and celebrate this day, this is it. It's about finding the balance at that point to make sure that it is actually done.
I would actually take the view, in addition to what you've said and very wonderfully put, that when you look at the threat that would bring about extinction of these wild species, you are actually looking at the very things that would actually threaten the existence of the human species. For instance, if you look at, say, overexploitation, we call it deforestation, for instance, but that is overexploitation. And the net effect is something even more interesting. It's called climate change. These two have a very direct correlation. But when it comes to wildlife, you have something called poaching. Now, with poaching, Following close on it is something we are dealing with even today. It's called pollution. In as much as all these things affect wildlife, they also affect the human beings who live in that same environment that the wildlife live in. Now, for the longest time, communities that lived with wildlife, which was the majority of people on this continent, there was an MOU. People knew how to live with wildlife.
Interestingly enough, maybe at this point, today's proverb, CT.
This proverb seems to have gotten you where you want it, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay, the dance of a millipede does not impress the person who has seen the dance of a snake. So less millipede along as we consider the snake.
Okay, but I'd like to talk about the way you started. You talked about how we have not prioritized the environment because we feel like we have bigger problems. But my question would be, when did we separate the environment or wildlife from our needs? Because in my view, everything is interwoven. When we talk about we have bigger problems and then we say food. Where does that food come from? It comes from the environment. It comes from wildlife, and wildlife actually helps sustain the environment in its own way. They from the birds and the bees, they pollinate and they make sure there are plants, and these plants are fed on by the animals in the bushes, and then there's bush meat, and then there's just a well-rounded, self-sustaining ecosystem. So if we start thinking of it as we have this problem, so let's focus on it and forget about the environment, that environment is actually feeding us, and if we're not focusing and taking care of it, then we are having it we are losing at the same time. So I think when we're tackling some of the problems that we are facing, we need to have a very large view and a bigger perspective of how everything feeds into one another. And when we look at it that way, then we can actually tackle the problems that we are facing. We've talked about some of these environments, shared habitats. Look at the Amazon and the people that have been protecting that area for years and years, not because they're paid, it's just part of their culture.
Right.
Talk about the Mao. The Mao people were actually traditionally taking care of that region. Then with the Ogiek, who were taking care of Mount Elgon, we had a culture that was self-sustaining in terms of wildlife and the environment, because we looked at it reminds me of the phrase the circle of life. When an animal dies, it goes down into the soil, and then it fertilizes, and then the plants, and then we feed on the plants, and then it's on a whole circle. So we are all part of it. But when we remove ourselves from it, then that's another problem. So while we are thinking of the environment as this far removed problem, or rather wildlife as this far off removed problem, we forget that we all depend on wildlife in one way or another, even if it's just the money that comes from tourism, and our economy is depending heavily on it for survival.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because then of course it comes out that people everywhere need to remember that we depend on Mother Nature to survive. And this, of course, comes up from the UN chief. And he says, Guterres, that the message for this World Wildlife Day is advocating for a more caring, thoughtful and sustainable relationship with nature. I mean, if we look at the conversation, I mean, in Kenya alone, over the African continent, it really isn't anything more than, the politics of the day. It's dealing with corruption. It's dealing with, mismanagement across board, making sure that infrastructure is developed across nations, which is why I said that, this conversation doesn't really come into play. And to say that to have a more caring relationship with nature seems like it's something that can only be prescribed to certain nations who, in one sense or another, have actualized. It seems because, I mean, they're not, in many cases, they're not dealing with, providing food, shelter, the basics.
They also don't have wildlife to speak of because they decimated it.
Yes, for sure.
Right. So I mean, okay. So in this case, looking then to the nations who still may have something left and saying, you guys then are the ones who need to make sure that you keep your wildlife in order. At the same time, we're still making the demands of you that you have democratic governance, for example, and making sure that you're not riddled with corruption and mismanagement across board. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, the balance has not been struck.
Absolutely.
Has not been struck at all.
You get the impression that it took them all those years to ensure that they didn't have any wildlife to speak of, with the exception of squirrels and birds, for them to come to the understanding that you need to preserve these things. Why do you think the concept of a zoo came up? because they had animals to speak of, killed them, including
Depleted,
snakes.
yeah.
Depleted it completely. They now understand the importance of it. They do. When our friends from the West came to this continent, the same mindset came in. If you read about the numbers of elephants that were killed, you shudder.
Just for sport.
For sport, so that you could sell the tusks and have a
Pose,
trophy
yeah, and pose
and
for
pose with your foot.
pictures.
Yes, that was the important thing. Now, the argument that they have learned, unfortunately, is a false argument, because when you talk about this, you forget that the other danger to wildlife is something called pollution. The greatest culprits when it comes to polluting our seas and the air are not us. It is the West. And they are the ones who, in many, many ways, have been held responsible for these diverse and dire climate changes that we keep talking about. The North Pole melting, God knows what else happening. And the reason is this development you speak of and the balance. The alternatives have always existed, but profit has always gone ahead of what you call conservation.
Of
Even
course, yeah.
take a look at what the I would call it looming diplomatic spat or ongoing diplomatic spat with Somalia. It's based on the maritime dispute, which is all because of the oil that might be underneath the sea. Yet there's another conversation to be had about a sustainable blue economy that would deal with having, the marine life being taken care of and used by us for food and trade, but at the same time making sure that it is sustainable, so that in the long end we're not having a situation where, for example, like the humpback whale that we only have 40,000 and yet 20,000 are killed every year for soup, basically.
right.
So there are other conversations that we have, but we are all just focused on how can we make a quick buck out of this and dig ourselves out of, economic problems. But at the same time, the unfortunate bit is that we have so many examples of people who have done this and they are now regretting it because they have environment or climates that are just not good for their people. And you can take examples from both the East and the West. Last year, I think, we were talking about Amazonia. It was burning down.
Right.
The world was losing its mind because we were talking about how is it okay that this forest is just burning down the way it is. But then this is something that is referred to as the lungs of the of the earth. So there's so many conversations to be had. Should we be focusing on logging and and cutting down trees and hunting rather than making sure that we figure out ways to sustainably depend on these environments without selfishly just ripping from it?
I think that's the direction in which the conversation is going in this sense, because I mean, even of course from the bodies for conservation bodies that we see, the United Nations across the board, etc., it's not about that don't use the resources that have been provided by nature.
Yeah.
It's about using them in a sustainable manner. So if you're logging, as you say, for example, then how many, they say, chop one tree down and plant 10 to be able to replace then what you have taken away. And I think that is the word, and the crux of at the crux of it all then is sustainability, so that in the next 100 years, for those who are coming behind, there's something that they have to be able to pick up from, and that there's something that they can also use. Apart from that, have something that is better off than the way in which we found it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to continue the conversation. Let's take a look at what's happening with the weather right now. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be back in a moment.
Sugar and spice and everything nice.
17 degrees in Nairobi and partly cloudy. Mostly cloudy conditions will follow with highs of 26. Rain showers expected later on in the day. Partly cloudy conditions in Nairobi at 16. Highs of 26 and lows of 15. It's 13 degrees in Eldoret. Rainy conditions later on as well with highs of 24 and lows of 13. In Nyeri at 16 degrees. Rain expected later with highs of 27. Looking into Kisumu at 19 degrees. It's going to be showers all through most of the day with highs of 28 and lows of 19. 26 degrees and mostly cloudy in Mombasa with highs of 33 and lows of 26. Partly cloudy conditions in Malindi with highs of 32 and lows of 26. Scooting on into East Africa, Dar es Salaam, 26 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions. Rain to follow later with highs of 32 and lows of 25. 26 degrees in Kampala with partly cloudy conditions and thunderstorms expected later with highs of 26 and lows of 20. Wrapping things up in Africa, light thunderstorms experienced in Lagos through the day today at 26 degrees with highs of 34 and lows of 26.
Oh yeah. The greatest hits ever, played all workday. Let's go now. Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
It is World Wildlife Day, and wildlife, as we're talking about it in Kenya's biggest conversation today, and I thought about it, we tend to think it's just animals walking about, you know, but we're looking at vegetation, we're looking at flora and fauna, and things that we actually do need to protect for our sustainability and for our sustainability, yet in a sustainable way, in a sustainable manner, and say that the world has stopped. And this, of course, was from 2013, where they saw, you know, of course, different participants saw that things were going awry, things were really going south, and the people then, of course, this was at the cusp when the MDGs then became the SDGs, and said that, you know, we need to now be looking at the world in a sustainable manner. Since we've gotten to a certain threshold, we need to then say, over time, we need to make sure that we still have this thing around. And I want to go over to things like what we see in the city, for example. The national park that we have right in the middle of a city. That's a huge expanse of land. And many people will tell you at this point, you know what? I don't see the reason why we have this huge expanse of land right in the city of Nairobi, for example, where it could be used for different things, infrastructure. We have the railway passing through the park as it is anyway. So why not take, you know, round up, you know, the wildlife that we have here, whether it's animals or whether it's species of plant and other things, move it to another place where we can make sure that they would be able to have a sustainable existence, and use this for something else. And then, of course, the questions, and people are up in arms and saying, why would you do something like that? The other day there was a party in the bush, as it were, and there was all kinds of uproar about why would you come in and bring, you know, commercial aspects into a place whereby you're likely to mess around with what is natural, and why do we continue to cause some kind of abuse to nature?
Does this party take place every day?
No, it's once. It's a once.
Yes, and how exactly does it interfere with nature?
Because we are littering, we are interfering with other animals' habitats, and of course we are setting a precedence. Because if we start like this, then where do we draw the line?
Right.
There are things
so should we then have
doing.
safaris? Because that, if you look at the numbers of vehicles that enter the park, the numbers in peak season. And if you look at the tented camps that keep increasing, they keep telling us, yes, there's a formula they use for the number of tents that can be within a certain geographical area, the hotels being built there.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that this one party that takes place once a year is going to interfere more with the habitat and the environment than all these structures and all these people who troop through the parks year in, year out?
I don't think so. I think if we have a problem with a party, and if we have other activities that are going on in these parks that need to be regulated and looked at, we should have a very wholesome approach towards it. So if thousands of people trooping in their vehicles, private and, you know, the hired ones, are interfering with the, you know, ecosystem, then it should be reduced and stopped.
You see, this is a debate that is not likely to end soon.
Yeah.
It's a debate that prevented a road structure that had been planned for the Serengeti to be ground to a halt, because the nature of the road, the length of it, the breadth of it, the capacity, and the conservationists argued strongly, and their case won the day. But you see, a lot of the voices that we hear about wildlife conservation have to do with national parks. People forget that when you have air pollution, you are interfering with birds. They are also wildlife. Not cousins, they are wildlife. Okay? When you throw effluent direct into the waters, you are interfering with fish. They are also wildlife.
Yes.
But what is even worse is that contamination ends up with human beings because we end up eating this fish. So we, in essence, are contaminating ourselves with this process that we have.
Absolutely.
But the thing that I think must be taken more seriously is the ability to look at our efforts and our resources realistically. Case in point, Nairobi National Park. A beautiful idea, a wonderful thing, but which, in my opinion, has surpassed its usefulness given its geographical location. Pause for a second and look at the landmass of the Nairobi National Park, look at its location, and look at what else is around it. The city, over time, and industries have slowly but most assuredly engulfed the Nairobi National Park to the point where it is right in the middle. So all these things that are deterrents that we are speaking about, unfortunately, will be subjected to this national park. If you're talking about pollutions, vehicles ply along there day in, day out. If you're talking about wildlife not having a habitat, whether it is air pollution, whether it is noise pollution, simply because of the developments that have come up. If you're talking about pollution of the habitat through industries, you go to the Kitengela area, which also borders the same park, you will find that more and more industries are coming back. And we don't seem to have a very stringent policy of ensuring that we manage the byproducts that are dangerous from these factories. And the recipient of these things is likely to be the Nairobi National Park.
Okay, so I feel like
So it's in
that-
danger
yeah.
anyway. This is what you're saying. It's
Yes.
in danger
With every
anyway.
passing
It's taking a
day,
life of its own.
It's
The-
in danger.
yeah.
With every passing day, the animals within that park the danger keeps growing day by day. You hear of lions being found on the road.
Yeah.
Yes, it's you who built. It's
There's a
us
lion
who
that
built.
ate
we
somebody
encroached
the other
on
day.
we
Yes.
encroached on their habitat. So
Yeah.
basically, they're taking a walk in the neighborhood that they know of.
neat.
Actually, if you want to look at it in that
Please
manner.
remember that the animals like to go on a walkabout, and usually their passages they follow either to go for pasture or they to seek water.
Yeah.
And many conservationists understand this. So even if they put up their building, they will not interfere with that particular passage that animals have used from time immemorial.
Right.
If you look at Nairobi National Park, where are animals likely to migrate to in the event of there being a drought, say, for instance, in the national park? Or Langata? Or Tiende?
Right, they're going to take a walk in there.
Where are they going to go exactly? Now, as I asked this question, the answer is they have actually been going. So that's why you find somebody has been visited by some big cats.
Yeah. Now, I feel like that problem could have been handled with proper planning. So while we should have had an awareness that we are sharing a habitat with animals, and therefore as we plan for the city, but obviously this city does not grow according to a plan. We just buildings mushroom everywhere based on whoever can afford to get a license to build or whatever the procedure is. So going forward, we need to look forward and have an awareness that there needs to be a working plan that will actually consider maintaining that ecosystem as it is, or figure out a plan on how we're going to shift these animals to somewhere else and ensure that we are not doing it in a way that is not. I wanted to say inhumane, but they're not animals. In a way that is
sustainable.
Yeah,
I guess
sustainable.
That's
Yes,
the buzzword
yes.
that
So
we're
that
looking
the
at for
life
this day,
keeps going on, but at the same time, we're not waiting for them to be literally chucked from there because they have nowhere else to go. Because that will just play to that narrative of human wildlife, conflict. That same thing that's happening in Botswana, where they have no idea what to do with their elephants because they're literally trying to weigh between human life and the elephants, and now they're trying to get people to hunt them for sports. But if I think a plan was in place to consider the population growth of these animals, their migratory patterns, and then say, because this environment, the urban environment, is growing in a way that it has taken up a life of its own, then we need to plan for these animals and figure out where to go. I mean, we need to look at it in a more realistic, less romantic way, because a lot of environmentalists really just want to keep it the way it is, but if we are being realistic, we might not be able to.
You can actually understand why they do, because if you originally came from a culture that had wildlife that you decimated completely, you would then understand the importance of it, and you'd go overboard in wanting to protect it, because you understand you
What
can't,
life looks like
yes,
without
you
these.
can't
Right,
regenerate
without-
this thing. Once you've lost it, it's gone. Okay.
Because what are you going? Because we're looking at cement cities essentially
Yeah.
that were built at the expense of this wildlife or at the expense of nature. Nature, yes, decimated to levels whereby you couldn't bring it back because you can get rid of wildlife, you can kill them off, and they go back onto the earth. But what are you going to do with cement cities across board? I mean, if you travel to some of the cities in Europe, and that's what you see. The only thing that you then would be privy to is a patch of grass here or there, and then
And it's also planned. It
is
seems
planned,
like this
absolutely.
tree was meant to grow here. Like
we had
you
the
know?
conversation on Friday about recreational parks and things like this, and they plan, and now I understand. Actually, I just had an epiphany that they plan it like this because they've got very little room otherwise. Hereby, I think we do take for granted that we have large expanses of land that can be used for so many things. And a lot of the conservancies that you see then mushrooming in Kenya, for example, interesting to see who owns them and who actually, establishes them. Of course, realizing that in the neck of the woods, they don't have such.
And I'd like to point out that it's not to say that there's no room for nature in cities. It's just that the kind of nature might have to be more controlled.
Like
for
a
example,
zoo.
or parks like where you can just go and see a few squirrels here and there. I think it's Central Park in New York that is quite vast but pretty controlled, and it has. Obviously, you're not meeting snakes and thing there. I haven't been there, but I'm sure it is more controlled than what we have here because this is just what we found from our forefathers.
For sure.
But yeah, so there's room for nature in cities, but I'm not sure how sustainable given what City pointed out, that the urban settlement has been engulfing the park over a period of years, and now it seems like they might not
The
have
size of
anywhere
the
to
park
go.
is 117.2 kilometers square. That's huge real
Vast.
estate. Okay, we've argued in this very well. I have argued in this very radio station that the amount of money that you could realize for that particular land, with proper planning and implementation, the two have to go hand in hand. You could build many things. What you're suggesting, a modern zoo of sorts, but conservationists will tell you animals are supposed to be free.
Their natural
Yeah.
habitat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, but if we leave that option out, it is enough money not just to relocate the animals,
Yes.
but it would enable you to actually to be able to ensure that the same conservation efforts are taken elsewhere.
And it can be done over time so that it's not just like plucking
No.
masses. Yeah, it can be
No.
a decade-long plan where we take
Yes.
away the lions and then this
Or
and then that.
yes, you look
Or-
at the animals that
Yes.
require more space than the others.
Right.
There's a whole thinking, and by the way, there are people who understand these things really well.
Right. I mean,
And
they
plan for
dedicated their
them.
lives to this kind of study. They
They
understand that it can
they
be done.
understand it. Yes.
Because the alternative will be quite brutal and not what we want.
No, it wouldn't. And also, if you sort of like, let's chase the animals and sell the land, goodness, you will have created one disaster and supposedly sought a solution, but created a monumental disaster that you will not be able to come from under.
And the objects internationally will be very bad, actually.
Well, of course. It is World Wildlife Day. We're celebrating, and of course, that looking at creating a balance with nature, having a more caring relationship with nature is what has been sent out there. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We're going to take a look at traffic and see what's happening on our roads right now and come back and continue the conversation.
Spice FM. Nyeri.
All right, let's see.
Classic soul.
Let's see how
R&B.
things have changed on the roads this morning. Taking a look at Mombasa Road, still moving very slowly this morning, all the way from the SGR, and then turning off to the airport junction very slowly. Then before Cabanas, Ngong Road traffic going towards town. It's building up from the city mortuary all the way in and outbound. Interestingly enough. heavy traffic from Athi River to town due to wide loads that are on the road this morning. And this, of course, are the trucks that you see. Rongai Langata, it's crazy traffic this morning, and then connecting right around the Bomas of Kenya all the way down to the Timor roundabout. That is it. Bagavi Way, there's a vehicle that has stalled, so that is causing traffic there. This is a problem. If you're approaching, understand that an accident has happened just in front of you there, and that's why it's going very slowly. Jogo Road from Hamza to town, as we see, also moving extremely slowly this morning, but it's moving all the same as you get to the City Stadium roundabout. The CBD, Moy Avenue, it's a bit of a mess this morning as you get into the city. It's going to be chock-a-blocked for some reason or the other. We'll take a look at that in a short while as per what is happening. We'll let you know. Do let us know what you see. It's a Tuesday morning, getting right into the week. Spice FM KE on Twitter, or give us a call on 0719 012 600.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Welcome to Spice FM, the best exclusive radio station bringing you the best mix of the best music ever. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94 point.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. You're in the Situation Room. Wherever you're tuned in to us, you're listening to us on 94.4 in Nairobi, Mombasa on 87.9, Nakuru on 96.0, Eldoret on 96.7, Nyeri on 90.9, and Kisumu on 102.5, Malindi on 97.7. The live streams are up, of course, Spice FM KE on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. I am Nduoko in the studio this morning with Siti Muga and Trix Ngado from KTN Morning Express. It is World Wildlife Day, and we're looking at sustainable methods for making sure that we've left the earth in the way in which we found it, or in some cases much better.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. All right. Of course, suggestions having come from world conservancy bodies, like the UN, of course, being one of them. And I think that there have been many things that have been said over last night and moving on to this morning, and saying that, you know, what we have is quite special, if you want to look at it. I know that Trix was saying we need to step away from the romanticization of all of this and say practical ways in which we need to be.
Romance is useful.
It is, yeah, but we need to have practical, balanced ways in which we can live with development and nature, because we can't say that we are not going to develop. It's going to happen. Infrastructure will be erected around this country.
Increase.
Populations are increasing. There's rural to urban, movement, migration. It happens all the time, and vice versa. We have the wildlife, and we're talking, of course, of animals and vegetation, flora, fauna across board. It's got to be balanced, and I think it's interesting that this is the buzzword along with sustainability that they've employed on this year's celebration, which is the 7th of all of them. But to say it's got to be done in a sustainable manner. Once you take, you replace kind of thing. And yes, they can't ask that we don't develop. It is going to happen. But can we do it in a way that we make sure that we protect the ecosystems, that we protect the habitats that we have amongst us? And I'm saying that at this point, it's got to be a priority of governments, because if it is not, forget about it. We're going to decimate what we have.
Well, which is where planning comes in, and implementation. I know we have a problem with implementing all our plans, wonderful as they may be, but we have to be very conscious and intentional with how we are handling the environment. And we have to remember also there are certain benefits that come from these animals and these plants and flora and fauna, including the birds, as City said. And one of them
and the plants.
And the plants, yes. One of them,
and the fish.
a very big one, is medicine. There's a tale, I don't know if it's an urban myth, of when Ebola was ravaging West Africa. In Sierra Leone, there's a woman who did not want to be quarantined, who fled into the forest and literally consumed all manner of plants that her forefathers and grandmother and mother had told her a medicine, and emerged healed. Well, that might be not true, or might be
nice
peppered
story.
And spiced with some,
I personally like the story.
Yeah, we're told that she came out healed, and nobody, when she was asked, what did you consume in there, she could not remember, but all she knew is that she was just grabbing
My question
weeds and
to
the
her
thing
is, did she also meet Tarzan?
in there. But the message that comes out of it, and basically, is that there's a lot to be gained from nature aside from food and its beauty. We need to also embrace the fact that we could be sitting on gold in terms of pharmaceutical, discoveries and what have you, like the Chinese do with their traditional medicine. And we should, as we are looking at sustainable ways of using the environment, that's one of them that we, I think, as Africa in general, have really not developed.
The existence that mankind has had with wildlife, if you look at communities that literally live next to wildlife, it was for sustenance. It wasn't for commerce. Not really. People killed wild animals for food, and they didn't need to kill 10 of them. If you look at the wild, wild west that one reads of or sees in movies, and you look at the way bisons, wild buffaloes of that particular part of the world were killed, it wasn't for food, it was for sport.
It was for sport, absolutely.
So, and they were many.
Right.
Now, look at the effort that was put into ensuring that they were decimated. What am I saying here? At the risk of sounding like I'm repeating myself, it is always good to try and learn from the mistakes of others. Okay?
For sure.
Yes. Our friends in the West made their mistakes. We don't have to repeat those mistakes of theirs. But if you look at communities that also border huge game parks or where there's an abundance of wildlife, a lot of efforts have been made to, A, ensure that there's a safety net called a fence that you have around these. 2, to educate the public. What I think we have failed in as a nation or as a government is to ensure that these communities benefit from this wildlife directly. Because if they did, they would have the need to protect this wildlife. Because they would know if these animals go, my livelihood will be impeded on. But that particular hurdle has not yet been overcome. So we haven't gotten to a point where the communities that live among these people fully. If you go to the Mara, what is for sure, you will come across many conservancies. And these conservancies work because of that very idea, where the community that owns that land have an arrangement with the person who is supposed to take care of the conservancy. And they have a direct benefit in terms of those who are employed, those who are trained, and on the income. So these very people who live here, the natives of this land, will protect these animals more than anybody else.
That is quite true.
If they buy in, and this is the thing, they've got to also buy in to this idea, and it's got to be a collective thing, because we could be here, passing this out as a government. For if the government decided that, at some point said, okay, well, we're going to take this a little bit more seriously and say that, everybody then has to be involved in this process, from local communities as high up then as, national government and the executive, and say all of us are in this. There's got to be a buy-in from the local people for them to understand that, there's something in it for us as well, because that's the thing. If you're not connecting on that level where people understand, whether it's people around the conservancies in the Mara, whether it's people on this side of Mombasa Road, where you look at the Savos and places like that, where these animals also exist, where you have visitors year in, year out on end coming basically to see what is available. If there's no buy-in for them, it's unlikely that they're going to lend their hand towards this thing called conservancy or sustainability.
And as far as that is concerned, the buy-in, when it comes to communities such as the Maasai and those who are vastly looked at as the custodians of areas that have these animals, it feels like they are eons ahead in terms of that type of mentality. If you're talking about my village mates in Western Kenya, we forget that they are actually supposed to be a part of this conversation. When you talk about the lakeside where this pollution is happening that the nation was telling us for weeks, we forget that they should be involved in this conversation so that they know if we allow this prison to be putting raw effluents into this lake, then we are directly affected, because in a few years we have nose fish to speak of, or we'll have cancer fish that we can't even consume, yet we have no alternative as far as food is concerned. So I feel like we should move from focusing on the areas where traditionally I think it was the white settlers made it a point to ensure that the communities are aware of the benefits, and move further down the line to areas where people don't even think of the environment, and now start having those conversations and impacting that sort of mentality.
If they do not see or they do not understand the direct benefits, they will not comply. And since there is a direct benefit, they must be made to understand that they are the ones who are decimating that benefit. They're the ones who are killing that benefit. It can be done. This is not an impossible task. For instance, if you look at fishing that is taking place in Lake Victoria, what has taken center stage is now what we call cage fishing. This literally that cage fishing. You build cage and you let the fish grow in these cages, but it's somewhere deep in the sea.
Then you literally just pull it out.
Yes, exactly. So you're away from the direct influence of this pollution that takes place. But if you give it time, it will catch up with you. It's not as though the pollution will simply stay along the shores of the lake.
Yeah.
No.
The people who live in, if you want to look at areas that are affected by a lot of the pollution that we see, which essentially affects the ability then to live sustainably with nature. If you want to look at even urban areas, Nairobi, you talked about the expose that was done a couple of months ago, and even the one that we saw just a few days ago. Along the river, the communities that live along the river in Nairobi, of course, they're directly impacted by the pollution that is experienced. They can't use that. That water cannot be used. If we're going to talk about, the stench, the diseases that would come just as a result of that. If you want to look at people in other areas, if you have plastic in the sea, for example, it's affecting fish. If you have raw sewage being dumped into a lake, affecting fish, they see the direct result of this.
Right.
This is what they experience now. For them to be able to see it as sustainable, they are going to have to experience the benefits of it being clean, for example. And this is why I'm saying it has to be a collective effort. So all of these wonderful things that are being said on this day, if it is not collective, and I'm saying at this point, if there is no collective effort that's being made with the buy-in of every single community that lives around these areas that we're hoping to protect and sustain, if the buy-in does not come in from across the board, all of this is an exercise in futility. The conversation itself at some point is just going to remain that, a conversation.
The question would be, whose responsibility is it right now? Because it's sad that we still today bemoan that nobody has done what Michuki did for us with Nairobi River.
We do.
Yeah.
But then devolution ought to have taken care of that. You know why?
It should have been encompassed in that.
Because it did. Because when you devolve, the Mara is in Narok. So, yes, the national government may want to have a say, but it is a resource that the county of Narok has a first say in. It's not complicated.
So we should relook at the systems that are in place?
Actually, the burden should be placed directly, if you ask me. Because how is the national government going to supervise something that is devolved? Tell me.
In someone else's kitchen, basically.
Yes, because if it's the lake, all the counties that share the lake have an equal responsibility for the lake.
The counties, if we're looking at it from a governance point of view, absolutely. And all the communities as well. And I think in this case, in terms of then what needs to be implemented, this is where the government plays. Yeah. But then in terms of how the action then needs to be taken, I think the communities also have a role to play. Yeah. What are we doing? Are we putting safeguards in place to make sure that there's no dumping in the ocean? Are we putting in checks to make sure that if we see such things happening, there's somebody who is, sounding the alarm and saying this cannot continue in this manner?
But then I would ask, what county in this nation today would be sitting talking about the environment and wildlife?
They all have departments of environment, by the way. But what departments of environment do is they collect rubbish and they cut grass.
Let's look at
in the town center, not even outside.
It is World Wildlife Day, celebrating that, and celebrating not standing up and throwing pom-poms around, but in this case saying that, certain things then need to be done if we're looking towards sustainability. Our guest host in the studio today is Trixie Ngado from The Morning Express, and we're having that conversation on that. We're going to take a break shortly, but the phone lines will be open and we can continue that conversation.
.6 Spice FM, Malindi. Breathing life into the 90s.
Hey everybody, what's up?
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation in the Situation Room
Mature,
today. Of course,
intelligent
celebrating
talk
the
every
what
morning.
is World Wildlife Day. Ndwoko and Siti Mugwa in the studio today. And talking then about Siti, I'm not really sure if we say, you talked about that just before we went off that, the job has been collecting rubbish. Is it really every ministry, or rather every office, county government, has an environmental office? There's an environmental department. It's a department, right?
Or a ministry.
An entire department. And we have a ministry as the umbrella body for all of this around the country. But honestly, I don't think it's a priority. What we talk about now, sustainability, and we talk about conservancy, and then talking about having a balance, a more caring relationship with nature. That just it is not at the priority right now. And I think it has to get to priority level in order for us to see something done about it. And I think that's the conversation we should be having, seeing the importance of such in communities around the world. And it's not just in Kenya, by the way. If we look at most countries, save for a few in sub-Saharan Africa, it is not the priority. It is looked at later. And I think that's the thing. Later is not time enough. You start looking at it later, we would have run out of time. And I don't think that is a priority right now.
Well, what is then a priority in this country?
No, I mean, what are we looking at? Political aspirations by individuals, and that's what takes the forefront a lot of times, unfortunately.
Not that.
Developing at some level.
It isn't. Politics is a means. It is a tool that you use to amass wealth. The sport that grips most Kenyans and occupies their mind and holds it captive is the process or the thought of how they can accumulate money for themselves. When you talk of impunity, when you talk about corruption, all these things take center stage because there are people who are willing to be involved in corruption. They are willing to push the limits because they want to pursue wealth by whatever means possible. Now, if things like wildlife conservation have within the midst of that discussion tenets that relate to the possibilities of making money, if conservation could directly relate to making money, you'd be amazed at how conservation would thrive. But conservation fights pollution, which in itself is a byproduct of industrialization, whose money people can see directly. Pollution, again, is a direct product of certain views that we have. You see, right now the world is talking because of the melting ice. There is a very direct and very vibrant debate about the influence of air travel and how it is the emissions that come from air travel are affecting climate change adversely and affecting it very, very fast. It's a very live and very, very active discussion. And many countries are talking about moving by a certain point to the point of zero emission or to the point where they've reduced it significantly.
Right.
Now, why? They have gotten to understand that they're actually harming themselves with their own practice. So there are people who are now preferring not to fly because they don't want to contribute to that particular process. But we then take on yet another national pastime and say, well, those are developed countries, we are not. Indeed, it is true. But should you not learn from the practice of people who got themselves into trouble by doing the very things that you're now doing?
But on the face of it, this conversation only comes, we even have, if we look at now, we have an entire page by the Kenya government as an example dedicated to this day and promises that have already been made in terms of what the country is going to do then towards sustainability and then conservancy of its natural habitat, etc., etc. In terms of whether that will be done over the next, 300 and something days until the next World Wildlife Day comes then and is marked, that's a different question. But I'm saying that this happens on this day. Everybody talks about it for a couple of minutes and then it is shelved. Nobody discusses it anymore. But I think the conversation now needs to be steered towards having the conversation.
We do have an entire ministry that deals with tourism, don't we?
Yeah, we do, for sure.
Precisely. And wildlife, or as we call it, is at the very heart of our tourism, is it not? In fact, who competes with Tanzania and South Africa? Maybe Zimbabwe to a little degree. Maybe when it comes to elephants, Botswana. So, we do understand the importance of wildlife. But in its entirety, and the steps that are needed and needed to be taken to ensure that whatever it is that we have is actually preserved, conserved, not just for posterity, but even for those who currently are living in its time to benefit from it. Now, it's again not something that people don't understand.
Right.
Or it is something they understand very,
Very well.
But there is a competing interest. It is the get rich quick story. What it is that people consider to be of utmost importance. Should I conserve the leopard, or should I find a way of poaching it so that I can sell whatever I get the pelt from it? What is of greater priority?
This is what I'm saying. We've not got, look, I don't think we've gotten to the point whereby it is a conversation starter, haver, keeper. We're not at that point where we're talking about wildlife vis-a-vis other things that need to be done. Just like you said, if that's the pastime, if that's the sport, being able to get your own and putting it in your pocket, where is there space for you to be talking about conservancy of such things? It doesn't.
Actually,
it may come up, CT, and then it is shelved, but it doesn't feature. It really doesn't, because we're not at that
point. If it's to be
point.
lasting, it can't be a conversation that takes place on a day such as this.
This is what I'm saying, because the next time we're going to be talking about this is March 3rd, 2021.
It's one of those things that we must include in our curriculum for schools, so that you are taught and you understand that the importance of biodiversity in the environment, and that you understand what conservation is, that you understand how you can practice it in the environment in which you live. The same way, you see, when you talk environment, you'll be talking about littering, something basic that most people don't understand.
That everybody seems to engage in.
But have you seen how easily people just toss things out of the window? And yes, again, there are things you need to teach. You can't assume that because it's been spoken of once, people will understand.
That people know.
And the best time to start is when children are in primary school. Even if they're being taught in it, let them learn and understand these things. It will become a normal part of life for them.
All right. So if we're looking at if we talk about the ages of socialization, right? We say by the time a child is 8 years old, they've already been socialized. They're set in their ways. They've learned certain
that has
things.
Been confounded at the time, but let's continue with the
right.
argument. Yes.
They're set in their ways in terms of if they're going to pick up on something, if they're going to form habits. By the time that age, they've done it. So we're looking at the majority of an entire population who've done things in a certain way, having not been taught. It's interesting because I look at the CBC now, and we look at things like environment taking center stage, and these are some of the things that they're being taught. So are we essentially saying that until we have put more people through this system, for example, we are not going to be able to move? Because you have an adult who's been littering, for example, for most of their life. Chances of them changing now are very, very slim to none, as it were. It's not going to change now.
If there is then what you call enforcement, we have laws that are supposed to ensure that all these things we're talking about actually take place, but the enforcement of it, not the law.
So maybe we should be like Singapore, where Singapore, you litter on the streets, you literally stroked with a cane.
Spit.
No, literally.
Forget spit.
The police don't arrest you. The police actually pick you up. They don't lock you up. They pick you up and you're whipped. So that serves as a deterrent for anybody who's going to come along and do something.
You're also
after
fined.
that.
All right? There are many things that a government can do, but it has to have the will. Because enforcement requires will. The laws, as I said, are already in place. We actually don't need many more laws when it comes to some of these things. We have laws. We have laws that are supposed to protect our animals.
Right.
We have laws that are supposed to protect our environment. We have laws that are supposed to ensure that we have a good life and that we live, as you called it, a balanced life. We do. But the enforcement is always a letdown. Because when it comes to that, then you hear news stories and you hear different stories. Worst of which is that the people who are in charge, for instance, of our wildlife are at the heart of ensuring that those very laws are subverted. We've had many gains. I remember the times when we've had people who've left the Kenya Wildlife Services, and one could argue that during their time there were gains. There were specific gains that were made.
Well, of course, if you want to look at things like local tourism, then having raised up a little bit. But then if I want to look at it, sorry.
No, I wasn't thinking of local tourism.
What were you thinking of?
I was thinking about ensuring that the system that protects what we call our wildlife, is well financed, it's well organized, and that they take the mandate that they have seriously. Meaning it's a force to reckon with that does what it's supposed to do. And I'm saying Kenya Wildlife Services moved from a position where they were in total disarray, and over the years grew and actually became far, far better organized than they've been. But it seems to be slipping yet again. It seems to be slipping yet again. And one could argue that it's the same forces that we see at work in other government ministries that is at work in that particular ministry.
Right.
Because remember, when you have a natural resource like wildlife, you found it.
You found it
Yes,
there, right? You
there's
didn't
nothing
bring
you
it
did. No, you
along
didn't.
with you.
All you're being asked is to work a little hard to make sure that it stays. That isn't really that difficult.
But
okay?
is this the center? Is this because I believe that there can be very many messages that a government or administration has, and we see this very clearly as it not being one of them. When the world is making a clarion call or saying rally around this particular thing, this is not one of the messages. This is not one thing that comes clear. If we look for Kenya, that has this great resource that you've talked about on the African continent, Kenya probably having one of the largest in terms of representation across species, from animals to birds to flora to fauna, vegetation, etc. It should be one of the central messages, but it isn't. It isn't. So then to say
No,
to
it
be able to
isn't.
protect that what you have, it's not coming out clear that the government really cares, and that's what I'm saying. It is not a priority. You look at the ladder of priorities; it's not at the top.
You say it's not coming out clearly.
It's not there at all. It's non-existent. It's non-existent in terms of its importance. Of its importance. Like I said, they're glowing messages today. Today, the 3rd of March. Tomorrow, there could be a ceremony or two that will take place in remembrance of today. But after that, we're not going to hear about it again until March 4th.
No. We
Until
will
March
hear.
3rd,
We'll hear of
2021.
it when certain departments or sections within the department or the Ministry of Tourism wants to showcase what we have abroad. You will hear of some of these things, but that is a different department because that's the commercial aspect of it, trying to sell the country. The actual process of conservation, of making sure that the flora and fauna are looked after, that anything that is considered wildlife. In fact, when you think of wildlife, I think of certain degenerate members of society who have some truly and general antisocial behavior. And they, in my mind, at some point would actually qualify to be wildlife. More than what we consider wildlife, because what we call wildlife are just animals going about their business and with us interfering with their way of doing things. That really is the reality. Yes.
On this World Wildlife Day, of course, then the call is for this to be one of the central messages of any government. If we're looking at, what other governments have done in the past and then being able to say the mistakes that they have made previously and then being able to say, look, something needs to be done about this. It needs to come into central messaging. It needs to take priority as far as what governments are doing. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We come and talk about more as the hours tick by. This is the Situation Room. We're going to take a look at what's happening on the roads in a short while and then be back. And the conversation continues.
Spice up your life.
Right after the Cabanas interchange this morning, it's at a standstill. Traffic in and outbound today for some reason. Not understanding really why it's inbound, but we'll get some information as to that in a short while. Jogo Road is absolutely crazy this morning, very slow. Of course, understanding that some roads in industrial area are being worked on today, so Jogo Road gets quite a lot of the influx. So the traffic starts right outside Sitam Jogo Road, and it's taking its time slowly. Within the city center of Nairobi, Kimathi Street and Moi Avenue, there's a problem there. Matatus all over the place. It's taking a very long time to get in and, of course, then get out. Coming off of Thika Road, not so bad today. Of course, the bottleneck standing at Kiambu Road, not as free as we would like to see them, but we are now at 6 lanes on Kiambu Road. It will take its time to open up there. But then getting into the CBD, of course, we see the problems that we face there. Waiyaki Way is very clear from Kangemi. It's then slow moving then down towards the Westlands roundabout. We'll take a skip then into Mombasa. 5 ferries up for service this morning, as we've been told by the KFS, and that means that we'll take care of traffic that you have to wait with at the exit and the inward bound from the ferry. Okay, other news coming from around the country. Do let us know what you see. Spice FM KE 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room.
The only way to start your day.
This
This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. In the studio this morning, my name is Ndoko, and of course, with C.T. Muga today. Today's proverb.
Well, before I even get to the proverb, one of the things that I must say regarding this, is it World
Wildlife Day
is when you talk of fishing, for instance, when you talk of conservation of animals in the parks, they are usually very strong lobby groups that deal with tourism. But you have to marry what they think and with what the local community. Take, for instance, fishing around where, let's say, at the south coast or fishing in areas like Lamu. You will find that there are very strong lobby groups that are in deep sea fishing, but for touristic purposes. Now, the local fishermen will fish with nets, and they will lobby against the use of this because they feel it interferes with their business of tourism.
Right.
Yet the truth is this: those are locals. It is their water. It is their sea. Now, if they cannot fish, they are not farmers. That's how they earn a livelihood. You run the risk of guaranteeing that these are a group of people who will feel that they cannot be free to do what they want in their own country, and they'll feel marginalized. And that is why I was saying that the dance of a millipede does not impress the person who has never seen the dance of a snake. Yes.
Well, of course, we'll be opening up that in a bit. But of course, today, CT, you want to, rather at this time, go into the silent partner in what we see in our country.
Yes, I am looking at religious organization and specifically the church. And I'm saying that they are the silent partner in encouraging and ensuring that the vices we see in this country are perpetrated and that they continue to grow. Early this week, which is actually yesterday and Sunday, yesterday to be precise, someone passed away. Someone who, unless you have an interest in history, you wouldn't even consider important. The name of this gentleman who passed away was somebody by the name of Ernesto. Now, why do I want to bring in somebody who died, God knows how many miles away in a place called Nicaragua?
Right.
Ernesto Cardinal was a priest, a Catholic priest. One of the things that Ernesto Cardinal did was he supported the Sandinista movement, a Marxist socialist group that then overthrew the government of the then leader called Somoza. He even got a government job and he became a minister. For his efforts, Pope Paul II defrocked him, and he was only reinstated and his position recognized in 2019. He wasn't alone. There were other priests who followed him. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Ferdinand Cardinal again. He said him like Cardinal, but he died in 2016. He paid a heavy price for it, but he said that Christ led him to Marx. And he said that if he looked at the Bible and understood the teachings of Christ, it taught equality, and according to him, equality could only best be achieved through communism or socialism. That was his view. He stood up against the ills of his time. And he paid a price for it. In this country, we've had leaders who've done precisely that. We've had leaders who stood in their time, and they are known. We have leaders like Bishop Okulo. We have leaders like Timothy Njoya. You have leaders like Bishop Mwana Wanzeki. You have bishops like Alexander Muge. And in modern times, there are two people who stand out. There's today's paper, we had the mention of Bishop Oginde, who is actually retiring from his position. He has on many occasions written and talked about vices and spoken about things that should be right. There's Bishop Oscar Mureo, people who've stood up and spoken. But for the large part, the leadership of the church in this country have been silent. And if they've spoken, it's in whispers. And that amounts to simply encouraging what is wrong. Then we've seen politicians doing what politicians do best, trying to gain empathy, sympathy, and support from within the church. And the church has encouraged this. This has manifested itself in the way funds drives are conducted and in the monies that are given to church organizations. This in of itself is not a bad thing. Inviting politicians for gatherings, not a bad thing. They're citizens and they're probably members of those churches. But when you consider the silence in the face of the many things that go wrong in this country, and you look at the support that our politicians receive from church leaders, then you really have to see that what we've seen in this country is a marrying of the church and state.
I hear you saying that the church then has not taken a stance to be really clear
they
on
haven't.
where the church stands in this
haven't.
country.
It hasn't been one strong voice. Some people may speak, others simply do not. And then what has happened is that a lot of the preaching we even hear from our politics have taken a very secular turn, and they sound more political than they sound godly. So there'll be the odd religious intonation that throws in the word God and Christ into the message. But the rest of it might as well be a political message. So you actually consider who we should rely on, and perhaps we should consider who our moral compass ought to be. Because clearly the church, generally speaking, has failed and continues to fail in this duty that is actually a calling.
When we hear or we see that political leaders basically call on the church in times of trouble, or when we hear that, going to the church and saying, at this point, this is where we kind of need some kind of salvation, it seems to me that the church is then used as a last resort when things have actually gotten proverbially thick, and at this point, then let's call on the church to come and help out in this particular case, or do something, or speak out. And I am of the opinion that it should be a continuous and consistent checking of morals. It should be at a place whereby it shouldn't be questioned whether are you with us or against us. It should be that there should be a solitary position whereby the church does actually hold and say, on this, we are going to be very clear. Whether you have leaders within the church who are taking that position, whether the church as a whole is saying, this is our stance and this is what we are sticking to. Unfortunately, that has not come out clearly. Over the weekend, we saw, and we've seen very many times, if we want to look at, what the deputy president has done over and over and over again, going to the church at times when it seems that, you need somebody to come and stand with you. And I think that many, many times, unfortunately, the church has failed when it comes to then saying, this is the position that we take. This is how things should be, being a moral compass. And many times the needle doesn't seem to be facing in any kind of direction when it comes to what we have seen. And if it has not been loud enough, or it has just been from a particular set of people or set of individuals, and not as consistently as it should be. But then again, the question would come in then, who says the church is the moral compass of Kenya?
There ought to be.
Why?
Because it's actually quite clear what the role of the church is. It's not something ambiguous. No. If you're talking about the Christian church, let me be clear. I'm talking about the Christian church here. What they consider to be the handbook on which they take their instructions is a book called the Bible. And the Bible is fairly clear about what a person who takes certain roles within the church ought to do. There's no ambiguity about it. If you are a church elder, church leader, you are, as they call it, a leader of a flock. Flock is this general public, these people here, called children of God in those terms. Now, if your role is to protect them and everything you're doing does nothing to protect them, then exactly what is your role? To stand in a pulpit and talk and say things and entertain? Or to stand by and enjoy being referred to as the man of God? Essentially, that's adulation. And honestly, from that perspective, that's actually not due to you. It's actually due to a higher being, not yourself, the human being that you are. The very role of leadership in this particular institution is the role of a servant. When you're a leader, you're actually a servant. We have lords. It's not to a certain level.
It's all the way.
It's actually overt, and it contributes significantly to the continued rot that we see. It actually contributes continuously to the erosion of the moral fabric of the country, because if the church, who are supposed to be the moral compass, are in bed with politicians whom we hold in fairly low esteem, then it means that same esteem is then passed on to the church. So it therefore means, by extension, that the moral compass is actually of a very low quality. What do you think that means in terms of the moral fabric of a country?
So, when a leader, a political leader who may be askew in their morals, for example, then comes to the church to seek, because this is what we've seen, seeking some kind of solace where they may have done something or there's some kind of accusations that have been levied against them, the first port of call in many cases is the church. You'll find that something happened during the week. On Sunday, they're making a statement and they're saying something like, you know what, this actually is, we need to now go back to our morals. Meanwhile, Monday to Saturday, you've been dipping your hand in the cookie jar. So then you come on Sunday and then you say something. Should the church then be allowing these statements to be made within the four walls of the church? And should we say that even in that relationship, we're going to allow for such things to continue to happen? Because maybe that would be a way then to say, look, to make these statements that you make, you can't make them one. It can't be a flash in the pan kind of statement. If that is the way it truly is, it needs to be something that is continuous. Because we see that this happens all the time. Something goes awry, you come running back to the church and you say something. As a political leader now, you come back and you say something. Then you go on and continue with your business as if nothing happened. Something else may go wrong, and you run back to the church. And this has been the trend over time.
I think
and we have leaders who are accepting of this kind of behavior. And this is where the question then comes in. Who is who? Who is leading who? How should it be?
The running back is fine. The church is actually a place of solace, and it is a place of refuge. It is fine. We have leaders being prayed for all the time. I don't know what on earth they're prayed for, because they're prayed for and you see it's business as usual. So clearly those prayers either were not answered or the prayers were a complete, total waste of time. But what we do see is this. When there is a strong alignment with political individuals and the church, and these very church leaders do not bother to sit and question certain fundamentals about the individuals or challenge them and say, folks, we are happy to have you as our members. We are happy for you to even contribute. But there are these questions that keep arising about you and the office that you hold. Can you please clarify these things for us? It's a gentle challenge, but it's a correct challenge.
This is the question that the church needs to be asking.
They ought to ask those questions, because it can't be that in air. It doesn't.
And one of the bodies that should be asking this question, probably above all,
is the church.
Is the church.
And of all leaders, not just some, all.
Of all leaders.
Yes.
We'll take a look at weather. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We're in the Situation Room this morning. Ndoko and CT Muga asking the question today, really, where is the church in all of this? Where should it be? We're back in a minute. Let's take a look at the weather. Mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi today. Rain expected later with highs of 26. In Nakuru, 26 degrees the high. Partly cloudy conditions through the day with lows of 15. It's rainy in Eldoret later on today with highs of 24 and lows of 13. Mostly sunny conditions for this morning though. 18 degrees in Nyeri and rain expected later with highs of 27 and lows of 15. It's 20 degrees in Kisumu. Rainy conditions expected through most of the day with highs of 28 and lows of 20. It's a warm day in Mombasa at 28 degrees. Highs expected of 32 and lows of 27. In Malindi at 27 degrees. Partly cloudy conditions today. Mostly cloudy later on with highs of 32 and lows of 27. In East Africa and Dar es Salaam, rain expected later on with highs of 32 and lows of 25. And looking into Kampala with highs of 21, thunderstorms expected later, mostly cloudy conditions this morning. And in Johannesburg at 17 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions and a chance of light showers later. Rounding things up in Lagos right now where light thunderstorms are happening with highs of 34 and lows of 26. Rain likely to carry the day.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
This morning, of course, talking about then who needs to call out who. CT.
I think everybody needs to be called out. The focus has been on the deputy president, and he seems to have borne the brunt of the criticism of giving to churches and ensuring that churches always come into play whenever he's making political statements. When the deputy president is questioned and questions are brought to bear about the origins of his wealth, it should be done, but it must be done for all leaders, not just him. Now, there are those who even argue that the deputy president seems to be in a political quandary. It's just a political position. People get into these positions in politics all the time, and usually by choice. You take a certain position, and that position may bear out, it may benefit you, it may not. Because it all has to do with the winds of change and the direction that wind of change is blowing politically in the country at that particular point in time. The unfortunate thing is the compass that's supposed to write these things, the church, is blowing with the politicians. That's where the problem is.
Right, but then many would look at it that the church by its very nature, I mean, you said it just a few moments ago, the church by its very nature is supposed to be a place of solace. So if somebody comes along and says, you know what, here I am and I want to be able to speak, from this position, the church are not likely to send this individual away. They're not likely to do that. Unfortunately, though, it seems that there has been a crossover and then you're not really sure who stands on what side. Are you with the church today or not? As speaking to the church, are you with politics or not? Which way? So with the way in which we have seen things, knowing that the political class in this country, leadership across the board, understands the power that the church has for influence over the people. Because when you're talking about religion, then you're dealing with matters of morals and matters of feeling and matters of emotion. And, it's not the tangible things that you do, but matters of your faith and your heart. And knowing that an institution that, like the church has influence over the people that it flocks. Right? Knowing very well that this is one place that you then will be able to get as much as you can marginally. That's why you see that. That's why you see that relationship happening there.
But they're fast losing that particular
Unfortunately,
influence.
they should not be given the wherewithal where it is that you can come in and use us at any point that you want to without firmly believing, or at least being seen to believe in the very tenets that makes the church, because that's what it seems like is happening. You come and you use this position whenever you want to, and it is very clear that with all the other actions, like again I said, from Monday to Saturday, seems to be the absolute opposite of this very institution that you come to seeking refuge on Sunday. And it shouldn't be that way.
Actually, it is that way, and it will continue to be that way.
It shouldn't be.
And it will get worse.
It shouldn't be, though.
Because what the church has gone and done, it has abrogated its power and authority to the politicians. So the moral compass that we now use are our politicians. That's the moral compass. Because ask yourself, are Kenyans more likely to avoid a bribe or to give a bribe? Are Kenyans more likely to accept a bribe or to refuse a bribe? Ask yourself, what is the likelihood? The likelihood, in my opinion, is that in the event that a bribe is offered, they're more likely to take it. Now, if you're talking about an inversion of a moral standing, there you have it. You are likely to go with the crowd. Why? Because the people who are supposed to stand in the gap for you to make a stand don't. If they do, it isn't loud enough. It should be really, really loud, so that it should be what I call church emptying loud, meaning you're told so clearly that if you don't like the message, you actually won't come again. It is okay, because that is actually what the church is supposed to do. It isn't the duty of the church to make people happy. It isn't the duty of the church to ensure they tell you things that please your ears. That's not their job.
So the duty of the church is to have these uncomfortable conversations that nobody really wants
to have conversations.
But you know,
if they're uncomfortable, so let them be.
Right, but in many cases they are uncomfortable for a lot of people, because if you want to give the example that you've talked about saying this wealth that you have, you should be able to tell us where you got it without batting an eyelid.
Yes.
If you say that your name was tainted in a particular issue, you should be able to... We need clarity. You should be able to come and tell us, my name was there because of this and that or the other reason, or they're lying or something. You should be able to say unabated, this is what has actually happened to me. And it should be the church who should be initiating this conversation and not being afraid to do so. But where we are now is that in terms of the respect for the moral institution, that flew out the window a long time ago. It doesn't happen. People respect or fear their politician more than they do the preacher or the pastor or the priest or the person with whom they accorded some kind of respect historically. And it has changed over time. It has. And I am saying that stopping short of basically saying, don't come and use this place to whitewash your activities that you have over the last 5 days. Don't come and do it on Sunday, because it's becoming evidently clear that it is just a place where you want to come and catch up on some morals or some kind of moral activities, as opposed to having lived that life properly over time.
If I had to go back to Nicaragua in the 70s, the Somoza dynasty, it's called a dynasty because 3 Somozas actually ended up being president.
I'm hearing you say samosa.
Samoza.
Got it. I know.
Yes. Not Samusa or not Sambosa.
Right.
Samoza.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They accumulated a lot of wealth in the 70s. One of the things, their so-called patriarch, a gentleman by the name of Anastasio Somoza Garcia, he wasn't the only one who could have been a possible leader in Nicaragua. There was a gentleman called Augusto Sandino. Sandinistas took the name from him. He was one of the stronger leaders who actually fought honestly and genuinely for the people. But he was brought in by Mr. Somoza Garcia, lured, and eventually was killed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way in which the Somoza family accumulated their wealth was through corporate bribes, industrial monopolies, land grabbing. You think it's only a Kenyan pastor?
Carry on.
Grabbing, foreign aid siphoning, meaning it comes in for this and you're not quite sure where it eventually goes. And by the 70s, they owned 23% of the land in Nicaragua. Their wealth amounted to half of Nicaraguan debt. Half. And 33% of the country's GDP. Yes. Hanging out with Amlioto. GDP could attribute was the equivalent of their wealth, meaning they were an extremely wealthy family. Now, it's against this background that disenfranchisement and grievances grew, because the poverty levels just kept increasing and increasing and increasing among the people. So when these Sandinistas came about, their message found fertile ground. It is the story that is replicated in Latin America. I just chose Nicaragua specifically because there was a priest who supported it, a priest and his friends. There were 4 outstanding ones. And they were willing to leave the priesthood, or they were willing to have the Pope chastise them and even defrock them. They were willing because they felt it was important for the interest of the common man to be taken. Now, we have a situation where the consideration that some of the leaders in our churches have is to how to appear on TV, how to preach the prosperity gospel, how to say anything that you like, how to even be obscene, how to even be obnoxious, and you're a church leader. And we're supposed to take the view that you're a church leader. Now, it then behoves the public to determine whether you are actually going to look for people who stand by the principles by which they claim to be and are, or those who just call themselves by name and are not.
Of course, people want to ask, and you say, then who is to blame?
It's not blame. No blame here.
No. But somebody has, like you say, abrogated their responsibility, and then somebody has taken over a certain responsibility by the way things happen, by the very nature of the environment, right? Because I am the one, as a politician, as it were, that is given all this attention. I basically am the one who is dictating by the things that I say, by the activities in which I engage in, and then people look to me then for leadership and guidance, as opposed to how it was previously when you would look to your church leader or your religious leader at that point for some kind of leadership or guidance. So who's dropped the ball in this case?
The church leaders
somebody's dropped the ball.
Right? So not blame. The church leaders dropped the ball. When politics takes center stage in a church setting, it is the politician's voice that is heard. It is his mantra, it's his view, it's his narrative that takes center stage. And the message that the church is supposed to put forward is drowned. That is the reality. And with the messaging come the traits that follow our politicians, unfortunately, the negative ones. And that's why certain narratives have taken place. Why do you think, for instance, it is appealing for young people to call themselves hustlers, when hustling is in fact thievery? Yes. Why? And it is... Now, if you're talking about an inversion of values to the point where wrong has become right, here it is. And people talk about hustler nation. If you look at the ethos that drives our young people, remember, wealth by its very nature is supposed to be created from value. You create value, people pay for that value. If you're the originator of that value, then you accumulate wealth from that value.
The proceeds of that, absolutely.
Exactly, and you become wealthy. Look at our newly rich and the newly wealthy. What is this value that has been bought? What is this value that they have put forth that people have agreed with and have given them money in exchange for? It's words.
It's words.
It's words.
Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Of course, asking the question today and looking at having that conversation about, in terms of the church, who's dropped the ball and what do we need to do about it? And which way should this conversation go? Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads right now and we're back. All right, very clear now on Thika Road, all getting into the city centre. Not a problem here in any way whatsoever. It has opened up and it's fantastic for a Tuesday morning. Red Hill Bypass, right around Westlands, coming off of Waiyaki Way, is a mess. Everybody was using that as an option and then forgot about the main Waiyaki Way. Getting into the city centre, coming from the Westlands roundabout, not so bad, but moving very slowly. Jogo Road, at Makadara today is moving very slowly. Please understand that because of the roadworks that we see happening until the 13th of March, this is going to affect a lot that will then be the spillover to Jogo Road. So you might want to plan in advance of time. A little bit of traffic at Syokimau, but it's moving very slowly but surely. Kitengela, of course, coming through on Mombasa Road this morning. Langata Road, of course, coming out is not so bad. It's moving slowly, but it's moving well. I think people have been able to now get into the flow. All right, take a skip over into Kisumu and see what's going on. Of course, Oboto Road then moving towards the airport. In and outbound to the city is clear this morning. Not so bad. Everybody seems to be happy. Let us know what you see. Of course, the bypasses are open, the southern and eastern in Nairobi. If you get stuck, let us know. Spice FM KE or give us a call. Let us know what you see. Keep people moving this morning.
So here we go. This is unbelievable.
Good nostalgic golden sound.
All right, are you ready?
And the very best of talk radio. Only on 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
That's it. Come on.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice
tuned in here in Nairobi on 94.4. This live stream is up, Spice FM KE on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. As we continue with the conversation this morning, I'm Nduoko in the studio with C.T. Muga. And C.T. tells us today that the church has abrogated its responsibility in terms of being the moral compass. And of course, now looking deeper into that conversation and then asking the question, with whom has dropped the ball, how should the conversation then be had?
You know, I don't want to sound like I'm making the politician the punching bag here. Even being one's brother's keeper, how often do you hear our church leaders calling out other church leaders when they've gone wrong? Tell me, how, do you ever hear? You don't. And they should. Maybe they have a forum in which they do it, but it isn't in the public domain. But they don't. Even when somebody has gone off left field completely and is baying at the moon, you don't hear of it. So, wrong slowly becomes right. There's something called social justice. Okay? And anyone who is a student of the Bible will understand at the core of it, the core of understanding the message that is core to this faith called Christianity is social justice. And social justice for the very person who is downtrodden and for whom the world in its secular way will not consider. The person we refer to as the common man. Social justice focuses on ensuring that this common man has equity, he has parity, he has a level playing field as far as his basic needs and wants are taken into consideration. Meaning, somebody can have access to education. Someone can have access to water, food, can have access to health. We have a constitution that actually takes care of this. And you know what? It's a fundamental right. Not an iffy right where it's
maybe you can have it in this instance and then
or
not
on odd
in
days
another,
of the week.
Right?
No. It's a fundamental right. When you have when you find yourself in a position where people are sworn in and take an oath of office to ensure that they abide by this constitution, and that then by their very action, they swear. Who are they swearing to? To the Almighty God, not to themselves, okay? And then the people who are supposed to be custodians of this particular value system don't hold these people accountable by ensuring that social justice is actually meted out for those who deserve it and need it. Something is truly and wonderfully wrong.
I've actually been in a forum, CT, and we could widen this a little bit, where you have some church leaders who do believe that, politicians are on a different realm of their own. If you just want to look at them as a target audience for the message of, morality and such, and believe that, they could drum it until they're blue in the face, literally, really, and say that we can continue preaching this message. We can continue making sure that we stand up as a moral compass. But, politicians, if they don't want to listen to what we have to say, they're going to find another way to make sure that message of their own is spread. So are we not seeing a case where we feel that some members of this, of the church, of this particular church leadership, do find themselves at a disadvantage, whereby it seems as if the politicians, in terms of a level, are a level higher than them?
And what is this higher level exactly?
Government, in this case.
But that's a secular setting. It's completely secular. Those who've separated church and state understood why they were doing so. Please remember.
So we're saying in this country then we should not separate it?
No, I am saying in this country that the separation that existed has been eroded, and we have a situation where the church and state seem to be becoming one and the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say. Because when you merge the interests of the church and the state for personal gain, what do you think you've just done? And there are people singing to your tune and clapping and cheering. You see, this faith that we speak of is not a specialist club where you need a certain income to join. You only need to be a human being. That's it.
Right.
That's it. That's the requirement. Human being. No other requirement. You don't even need to be of sound mind. They don't care about your height, your color.
You actually prefer that you were a bit downtrodden, as it were.
It doesn't matter, really. Human being, that's it. That's the requirement. Trees can't become Christians. neither can animals. Now, if that is the requirement and the understanding about how this particular manner of way of living should be conducted, and you find yourself in a situation where everything you see around you seems to fly in the face of those tenets, and the very people who are custodians seem to have abrogated their positions and are not stating what they ought to state or questioning what they ought to question, because their questioning is what leads other people and gives them the impetus to do so. If they are the ones who have failed in ensuring that the duties that are theirs by calling are carried out, what do you expect of the rest? So if you're talking about the rot, don't blame. If you're talking, let's talk blame. Don't blame the politicians.
Do you think so they don't have a role to play in all of this?
They do have a role to play as human beings, members of society and members of the church. But remember, they're not being called out. They are being encouraged by their silence. They are being encouraged by being brought in. They are the very thing that ought to make them stand up as members of that society. If you put off that cloak of leadership and politician aside and say, so and so who is a member of this church, that's it.
Do you think they realize what they're doing? Because I keep saying you run to the church as a solace when it benefits you only.
No, we have a case where the church welcomes you. Forget you running. They beckon you to come.
Right, but do they not realize? They realize 100% exactly what they're doing, because you know very well that should you go to the church there and speak from there is a population of, if we're just looking at Kenya, for example, there's a population of Kenyans that's likely to be attuned to what you're saying, because now you want to teeter-totter on the morality of things. And once you do that, when you dance on that, then you know that you're actually going to get the percentage of a group of people who say, actually, because he has come and he has premised this from the church, from the foundation of the church, then we're likely, this guy then is an upstanding guy and he is the one that we should be listening to. It seems that it's when things have gotten hot that the same politicians will then go back to the church and say, it is upon this foundation now we want to stand and address Kenyans. Because if they see me coming from a point of reality, they will see that in all of this, I am the guy, I am the good guy, or the person that then should be listened to. Because we have them using this foundation as a way to be able to get through the cracks, when actually, yes, they should be called out, but they use it over and over and over to get through the cracks. Whether they're standing on the pulpit in the church or whether they're standing in a stadium somewhere saying something, going back to morals at the same time, still using the church as, in many cases, a scapegoat.
President Moi went to church every Sunday, at least as far as I could remember. What was interesting about it is that anybody who wanted to see him around him would end up going to church. So all manner of people could be seen in churches. It was his lifestyle. There are other politicians of note in the recent past. The deputy president seems to have taken this role. He's seen in churches, he attends churches.
I actually think it's honestly, the way it looks, I actually think it's part of his team. You know, at least in a month, you got to make sure you tick it off that we've been in 1, 2, 3. It appears that way, because we have to go to that point whereby we're using.
Even if that is true, he goes to church. Even if that is true, as do other leaders who go to church, and as are other leaders who are notably noticed by their absence in churches. It is their choice. That is neither good nor bad. That is not really what I'm discussing here. I am talking about what has become the merger of the church and the state and the secular government, because church leaders have abrogated the position that they have to politicians, and the politicians have taken an even keener role on the morality or the immorality of this country than the church leaders. That really is what I am trying to say here.
It's obviously a situation then that needs to be fixed. It's something that then needs to change around if the church then is serious about its position as being the moral compass in society, as being now the way shower in terms of how things should be.
If you keep elevating people by virtue of their position in government or politics, and you keep elevating them, and that very Bible speaks very much about such matters, and even speaks strongly against such matters. If that is your value system, if your eldership is in a church is determined by your net value or your net position within that community, then the very, very foundation and structure on which this institution is built has been abrogated. So what you've done, you've given up your position and handed it over to the secular system that you work in, what we call the government, and the people around it call the politicians. That's what you've done. You've handed it over. Yes. And I'm saying this is what has not is going to happen, has happened and continues to happen. You still hear of a few voices or people who stand up, but they're few. That's the problem. They're few. The majority who don't say anything are silent. And their silence is what is contributing to this rot we keep speaking of day in, day out. The silence.
So, because something is not being said, and then any kind of behavior or attitude then change as a result of that, it says, well, since nobody is checking me, since nobody is keeping me in check, then I might as well be able to do whatever it is that I want.
They've agreed with me.
Yeah, basically saying that what I'm doing is what I'm doing then is okay. So then we are basically saying that the silence of the church then can be linked directly to what we see as the rot in society,
yes.
CT. And then we're saying that because they've dropped the ball, we see the constant, or rather even in-depth rot. It keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And the silence, if anything, is deafening.
Yes, and I'm saying the silence is predominantly what you hear, the deafening silence. You wait, you wait, you wait. You wait, no voice comes out, no one speaks loudly, no one speaks openly, no one challenges. So what you have is a constant competition of politicians against politicians. One saying this, one saying the other, and they've taken center stage. Even on Sundays, on the day that people who call themselves Christians hold a nice holy day, when you hear nice churchy religious things, you hear politics.
And even from that point, and I was saying that this is, look, obviously said this is what we see, this is what the case has been over time. How does it change? Because now if we're going towards a solution to say that a difference has to be seen, a difference then has to be made, something has got to give, something has got to change. Because if we're saying that result of the silence is what we see as this deep rot in society, then there's got to be something then that can reverse all of this. And if it's going to be one way that we see corruption then coming to an end, impunity then decreasing in terms of its levels, then maybe there's responsibility that needs to be played here and somebody needs to speak up. Something absolutely needs to be done. And perhaps we can look at those possible solutions as we come back. We're taking a break now. The phone lines will be open when we come back. 0719012600 is the number to call. Likely to hear from you in terms of the separation is no longer visible. The church basically has taken its bride, in this case being the state. Keep it here in the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Broadcasting worldwide, Spice FM.
Sugar and spice and everything nice, everything nice. Spice FM.
So here we go. This is unbelievable.
Good nostalgic golden sound.
All right, are you ready?
And the very best of talk radio. Only on 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
Biggest conversation this morning in the studio is CT Muga and myself, Nduoko. Remember, you can tweet us on our individual handles, CT Muga on Twitter and Nduoko on Twitter as well. So, CT, if we're going towards a solution, if we're going towards saying we know how it should be, the ideal situation should be that the church should be calling out all the time in terms of setting the pace, in terms of setting the standard as should what should be in this country. Because if we're making a direct link between the silence that we see coming out of the church and what should and what is happening in terms of, degradation morally, in terms of corruption, in terms of thievery across the board, morality levels sunken to an all-time low in this country, across countries, then what is it that should be really? What is it that we should call out the church for in terms of responsibility that they have in making sure that, if things are not getting better, at least people know and understand that whatever is being done is wrong? If we're going to say that they don't know, if we're just going to pretend for a minute that they don't know.
Kenyans are very good-natured and they're also very law-abiding. It may not seem so, but they are. But this is taken advantage of by the leadership class across the board, political, religious. This easygoing, self-preservation.
It's okay. Yeah.
Let's not ruffle too many feathers. Let's not kick too much of a fuss. Let's find an easy way of solving this problem. We don't need to make too much noise. Now, within the political realm, there's a word that has become popular and a bit scary. It's called impeachment. Why? It follows a legal process that is laid down in law. All these church organizations are supposed to actually have not only constitutions, but they have a way in which they conduct their business.
Right.
If you are a member of a church that seems to have been more of a political party than a church, then it is your duty either to continue those political activities, in which case you'll probably be aligned to two political parties, one a religious political party and another one a secular political party, or you raise your voice within that particular establishment if you feel strongly enough. And all these churches have bodies of elders and people who are supposed to hold the pastors accountable. Problem is, these churches who, that tend to have these man of God type leaders, they are the body that decides. Meaning, if you are an elder and you say something, you can get sacked.
Right.
So essentially,
Your job is at risk.
it's a religious dictatorship. That's what it is. And that is not the structure that is laid down in the manual of operation for this particular activity called the church. The manual of operation sets it up very, very clearly. Actually, the only time when you have a one voice you listen to, the theocracy around it, yes, but the management of it is fairly democratic. There are choices that people are allowed to make. That's one. Two, if indeed one feels that there's a problem and you're a member of the church, but you also feel that you cannot speak and that your operation and your contribution is going to be one of silence, then maintain the silence and shut up. Don't ever speak again about the issue, because whining and complaining is an irritant. If you're going to speak up directly about the problem, directly to the people who you should be speaking to.
And if they are scared, because this is something that we have to come into.
So what?
No.
Speak
And
even if
this
you're
is-
scared.
Right. This is the thing. We have to come to grips
Speak
with that
even
reality
if
that
you are
there are
scared.
many church leaders who actually might be
Speak
scared.
even if you're scared. What's
They
going to
might,
happen?
they might want to give you
Throw
the
you out of the church.
they might want to give you the impression.
Are we spoiled for choice in joining a church in this country?
They might want to give you the impression that they are not, right? And that they stand in the position in which they are, and that no fear comes their way. But a lot of them are actually scared to be able to say, calling out individuals, I heard what you said, I saw what you did, kind of thing. Many people actually, you would find that many church leaders actually do harbor this fear within them. They don't want to
Let
call
me
people
ask
out
you the
because
question.
of
So
the
who-
threat that would come to their position.
Then look for another job. Because if I understand this faith correctly, you are not actually working for that organization. You're working for a higher being.
This is the thing. I think things have
so
changed.
Who exactly are you listening to?
And this is what I think. I think along with the times also, this particular profession, in terms of the veracity with which it has been embraced, has changed. I don't think that people embrace it the way in which it has been embraced previously. You would find that many church leaders, or even those of a different generation and of a different time, this thing that I'm bringing up for fear never existed. There was the bold, unabated stance that they took for being able to say what they saw having gone wrong, and were not afraid to be able to say it. I think we have a different generation now where people are chasing after, interestingly enough, the same things that we see politicians chasing after. You want to put an extra buck in your pocket, you're not really concerned about the moral temperature of the country. You're really concerned. This is why we saw things like the prosperity gospel taking place, because they themselves too, it has changed over time, that people were not really interested in the moral temperature of the people, of the country, of the government. Really then has changed to now we see people are more interested in what they can put in their pocket as well. That's why we see the mushrooming of some ridiculous churches across the board.
Well, then
As
they
those the
shouldn't-
people that you want to then put this responsibility upon of saying that you be the moral check for the country. Absolutely not. Some of these people don't even know the nose from the ear.
But if they're not called out, they will continue in those functions. And what we have, we'll then have a church, or something that's called a church, which is the religious arm of our political structure.
But then we cannot, from what I see, we cannot depend on the leadership as we see it across board. And I'm speaking generally now, because you started this off by saying there's some individuals who, look, continue to, regardless, but they're not enough, and it doesn't come out as loudly as it should. But if we're going to look generally and for the majority, I don't think that we can depend on the crop of leadership that we see coming out of most parts of the church
Then what
to
you're
be
saying-
the moral compass for this country,
A
unfortunately.
time has come then for a change of leadership.
Absolutely. I think there needs to be an overhaul in the church.
But be careful here. Be careful, because
If we're talking about something as bad as
Yes.
seeing that morality
Yes.
or the
Yes.
degradation of the same
Yes.
has not been called out, then something drastic needs to be done.
yes, but you may bring in people who are even more drastic and worse.
Of course, it needs to be looked at with pinpoint precision and said, look, who are we looking at? Can we look at their track record to see that is there the same way that we do across in the private sector, for example?
There's something strange about the influence of material wealth. It corrodes even the best of intentions.
Absolutely.
And it corrodes even the best of morals. So, even as you debate this question, this isn't something for which there's going to be a magical solution,
No, it's not.
which is made in a statement. No. It's something that has to be an ongoing debate. And the debate has to be, why has the church given up its role and its position to the political structures of the country? Because that's what they've done. They've given it up. Why?
Well, I think it's been made up collectively of more individuals who are really not interested in that, unfortunately. We have more and more individuals who are making up this representation of church leadership whose end goal is not making sure that things are in check morally, unfortunately. And I think things have shifted over time. It has become a different goal. It has become different priorities. And that's why we see, because
Even morality
30
has
years ago.
changed.
Oh, absolutely. 30 years ago, were we dealing with the same kind of problem coming
No,
out of the
we were
church?
not.
No, we were not. And I think we deal with a different kind of representation in terms of who then stands. And people have changed over time. The goal posts have shifted. So people are knocking it out of the park in a different direction because really that's not where their priority lies, unfortunately. And the few that we have, few and far between do we have of those leaders in the church who are still very interested in making sure that they are the ones who sound it out when it comes to things not being done in the way it should be. So perhaps the leadership then needs to be looked at. Scrutiny then needs to be applied in this situation, for sure.
You know, the interest people have, what I think is scary is swimming against the tide. Because if you have a strong tide that seems to be heading in a certain direction, it always seems easier to go along with it. It doesn't require very much effort. But to stand against it, that is what is difficult.
It requires there's a lot of
But
strength.
however, even as we're coming to the end of this hour, the thing that I must emphasize is that the price that you pay for this silence that we've encouraged. Because with this silence, what it means is that whatever we think is evil will flourish. That's the price we pay. Whatever you think or you feel is wrong, but you say nothing about it, will flourish simply because you haven't provided a check and a balance for it. Yes.
But at the same time, looking at this, if we see that one particular area has the problem, we can't expect them to be the ones now to prefer a
Actually,
solution.
they can, because if you're looking at leadership, you're thinking in terms of a church structure. I'm not. I've gone beyond the church structure, and I'm saying a church is made up of people. In the absence of the people, there is no church. And the church building is not a church. It's just a church building.
It's a building, yeah.
There are voices you hear, some in civil society, again, some in the church, not loud enough. Now, these voices, if you ask me, if a voice becomes loud enough, it takes a position of leadership. And leadership may not necessarily come from the structures that we know or traditionally understand to be those. It's probably going to come from structures that are not traditional, but uphold the same values. So one needs to look at where these very values are being espoused and where they're being propagated. You talked about leadership. In my opinion, that is where the leadership is going to come from. From where people are willing and are quite happy to speak their minds and to speak the truth and to say it for what it actually is. Yes.
So again, it comes down to the people. Because if we're going to look at it, we talk about, asking for a change in leadership, whether it's government, political leadership, and saying that unless people get to the point whereby they're irritated enough and the bubbles have come, the agitation bubbles really have risen to the top and are spilling over, and people say we've had it, until such a time as that, you're not going to see any kind of change. Until the people of the church realize that, look, the people who make up the body of the church realize that something needs to give, that something needs to change in the way in which we are doing things, then we're not going to see that kind of change. The buck again stops with the people and saying, at this point, who is in your leadership? You then also need to then call out your leaders, isn't it? Isn't that what we're saying at this point? Because if we're seeing, I mean, like what you started off with, we're seeing not an imminent or potential, an actual marriage that has then taken place between the political class and the church.
Yes,
that has already happened.
And a reorganizing of the value system where when someone is fearful, instead of addressing the fear, they baptize it and call it humility. So you're a humble servant of God and you're afraid. And as you say correctly, fear not just captures you and holds you captive. It becomes a way of life. And then you reason around it and then you give it a new structure and you call it, well, this is me trying to be obedient to what I believe I ought to do. And yet the action that is required is not even to do anything other than just to face the truth for what it is. And the truth here is this. The so-called moral compass that we had in this country that was represented by the church have actually lost direction.
What would we see? I mean, as we go, as the minutes tick by for us to get to the top of the hour, what would we see that would change? What would we see that would change
we are seeing
if we see a difference in the way the church has been operating
not
in society?
Not what will we see, we are seeing it. We've never seen a time in our history when there are so many splinter groups within churches. The splinters for all sorts of reasons, but a splinter tells you people are dissatisfied and they're unhappy. There's no good and bad here. They prefer to go somewhere else. But churches that have focused their teaching on the manual of operation that is referred to as the Bible and focused on it and haven't diverted, there haven't been splinters. There's been what you call growth. Meaning, more people have been attracted to it and more people have moved on. But in the absence of that, going to the very basics, as you correctly asked, then I'm afraid the changes we're going to see are the changes that we're calling negative and retrogressive. That will be the change we'll be seeing.
But it's something that absolutely needs to happen if that is the direction in which we want to go and see some kind of change. This is the Situation Room, Kenneth's biggest conversation. Of course, having this, and we'll get into something more as we go and see what traffic looks like in a short while. Keep it here in the room as the conversation continues. We want to hear from you as we now enter into talks of coronavirus, but we'll talk about that when we come back.
Spice up your life. Broadcasting worldwide. Spice FM. This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chairs.
I've been very disappointed that Kenya didn't react fast enough. I was disappointed that it took so long for a committee to be set up. And in any case, you don't need to set up a committee of ministers. We have institutions that are supposed to deal with disease control. And they have been doing research daily. So their job is to now react to it. But it's even up to now, I don't even know all the symptoms of coronavirus except what I learned I'm seeing in the internet. I would have expected that there would be flyers, there would be barazas being held by chiefs. There should have been sensitization through the radio to let people know what the symptoms are and how to deal with it and the right protocols. There are many Kenyans, and I've received several messages. I'm in touch with a Kenyan young man who is in Wuhan, and he says they're on lockdown. But we would have expected the government to come out and say, we have so many Kenyans in China, the situation they are in is this, and it's under control. Because obviously the issue is not to evacuate them back to Kenya, but to ensure that they are getting treatment and they are protected in wherever they are in China. But we are not getting those straight answers from the government, because solutions are not done by just setting up a committee. What does the committee do? If you have already a Minister of Health with all the institutions, what is their daily job? That should have been, it goes without saying, that's their job to look after such issues. So you don't have to have a special committee for it. Because today it can be coronavirus, tomorrow it's going to be locusts. That's why we have ministries. Another day it's going to be a different type of disease. And so it's, I think you can say it was below.
So, of course, in this hour, we are looking into details of the coronavirus that's still taking center stage in this country. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. I am Ndoko in the studio this morning with Siti Muga, and looking at the coronavirus now and looking at how things may have changed or how things may have remained the same. What we've seen over time, time being the last 2 days, between Sunday and today, is that, yes, of course, a committee has been put in place to kind of deal with matters coronavirus. Now, of course, we hear the women's rep for Uasin Gishu County now talking about the fact that things are not as they should be. She talks about the government, who, of course, she in this case is part of what we have seen. Is
no,
that
she's not part of the government.
She's not part of the government in this case.
She's a member of parliament.
She's a member of parliament.
Yes.
But now, what we see, obviously, the outrage and the outcry still is the same. Things have not changed between Friday and Monday. That there should be more that should be done in terms of taking care. And unfortunately, what we do see in all of this is that there is an increase in the infections that we see worldwide. Now, of course, with the cases that we see, another case confirmed in Senegal, another one confirmed in Tunisia, and now taking us to the point whereby more questions are being asked and people are saying, a lot more needs to be done. Now, as we go forward, of course, I think it's clear that it can't just be expressions being made. We can't just have words thrown at this thing anymore. And I will talk about the differences that have come out of what people have said and what has actually been done. The case still remains that people are still asking to bring back students from Wuhan. And I'd like to say at this point that beyond just the sentiment, in terms of something tangible, something actually still needs to be done beyond the talking. And it still remains that people don't feel that even with this new committee that has been put together, the things that have been said, they're not comfortable enough. And I don't think we can talk about it enough. New things have come up. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of fake news also that has come about. And I think we need to deal with the facts very clearly now of what we have. Of course, it being a novel disease, there's still so much that we do not know, but we have to be very careful in how we deal with the information that is out there today. And as we talk about corona in this hour, we need to then look at those and say, these are the measures that need to be put in place when it comes to safety and protection of people, and we need to be very careful about the information that we are putting out there. Unfortunately, and something that you did raise a couple of hours ago, CT, was that medical associations where we don't have medical experts talking about this, having been brought into this committee, just as an example, telling people what needs to be done when it comes to fear of being infected or fears of coming in contact with somebody who may be infected. Their expertise is very vital, that their expertise is on the table right now as well.
The coronavirus, quite aside from what we fear, that is the eventual death that it causes and the manner in which it simply seems to spread, it has exposed within this country yet again our lack of preparedness and our lack of seriousness when it comes to dealing with matters that concern the general public. And it keeps playing out, even if you don't want to. This is one of those things which you will see and you will observe and notice, even if you have no wish to observe or see. We don't have the expertise and the might that China has. But that which we have isn't being utilized as it ought to
be.
Why would a medical emergency, because this is what it is really, the
It is a
social
medical
element is
emergency,
there.
yeah.
Why would we be talking to civil servants? Why would people whose job is to sort of like administer certain processes and who don't necessarily have a medical background, why are they taking center stage in all this? Beyond, should they not take center stage in bringing the experts who could actually help in this thing together? Do you see that happening? I raised it early on in the show. One doesn't hear it. I looked at that panel of people who the new minister brought in when we were talking about it on Sunday. And I looked. I did see a doctor. Well, I saw him because I know him. There may be others.
Right.
But it isn't about 2 or 3 doctors whom one person who is a host in a talk show knows. No, it's a question of bringing the entire establishment of medical practitioners in this country, of clinicians, and or the representative might of them being brought in to show that this thing is being taken seriously by the healthcare fraternity of this country. This isn't something you need a political face to. You don't. That actually brings about despondency and fear. Because if it's given a political face, then you get the impression that it's going to be dealt with politically, then you can see disaster.
Disaster coming through.
Yes, you can see disaster.
I think one thing here with all of this is that a lot of people then are asking questions, how do then because if we're going to look at the nitty-gritty of it right now, people are asking the question, how do I protect myself? What do I need to do to make sure that, if I do come into contact with somebody who may have been suspected to have been infected, then how do I carry out, rather this self-protection? And this self-quarantine business also, we need to,
self-quarantine.
I think we need to throw that out the window as a measure to make sure that we are taking care of things now. I mean, pick up the phone, take my vitals and then call somebody. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
If to begin with, people already know what to do. Let's say I feel unwell and I have to self-quarantine right now. What do I do? Apart from staying at home. Do I shake the hands of my children? Do I hug them? Do I sit in the same space with them? What do I do?
What do you actually do? Well, okay. I mean, I think at this point, when you're talking about how to protect yourself, and this is what has been prescribed by the World Health Organization, interestingly enough.
Has it been cascaded down to the point where the Ministry of Health is talking about it?
This is the problem. Any information that we are getting at this point is coming out, whether it's splashed in the media, from the World Health Organization, from frequently wash your hands with soap and water or clean your hands with an alcohol-based hand rub. Once your hands are cleaned, you should dry them thoroughly by using a towel. Maintain at least 1 meter distance between yourself and anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Hands touch many surfaces and can pick up viruses. Make sure you and the people around you follow good respiratory hygiene. If you have a fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical care immediately. Or really early. And these are some of the things that you're saying that you can do.
It doesn't sound any different from what the government issued when they're telling us to avoid cholera.
Right. You would have said to use the same things.
Yes,
and
wash
of course,
your hands, do the other.
Mask use of then we have a lot of people then scrambling around to see, I want to be able to buy a mask so that I can have that to use. If you are healthy, you only need to wear a mask if you are taking care of a person who has been infected. Wear a mask if you are coughing or sneezing. Masks are effective only when used in combination with frequent hand cleaning with alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. If you wear a mask, then you must know how to use it and dispose of it properly. So this thing of just wearing a mask because you feel it's going to protect you from any kind of infection actually is not the case.
Let me talk about something positive about this. Because there is something positive. What sometimes they refer to as the unintended consequences. NASA, the National Space Organization in the US, have satellites that read and monitor all sorts of activities on the planet. One of the things that some of their satellites do is they actually monitor pollution, air pollution. And one of the things that they have noticed, this was a report that was aired by BBC, there is a gas called nitrogen dioxide. With all the vehicles and with all the industries, this is emitted into the air. And they noticed that since the advent of, or the breakout of this particular virus, it has reduced so significantly that one could say there's hardly any pollution. One, the factories are not functioning, right? So there can't be any pollution. People aren't traveling.
Right.
So there's no gas emission from vehicles. All right. So for the first time in a very, very long time, the last time they actually saw this was in 2008 when there was an economic recession.
Right.
Meaning a slowing down of the economy and slowing down of production and all these things. So factories not working to their full capacity. But that is only positive insofar as we're saying that we have reduced pollution. But on the other hand, within the same country, you have a situation where certain things are happening. One, people who own restaurants, family-owned factories are shutting down and are facing imminent poverty. Not just shutting down so the business will not be there.
No.
Poverty. Because if you had a loan and you're paying it because people frequent your business, it means...
This is not going to happen,
Yes.
of course.
So the very thing that you had and which may have been security for your business also stands a chance of vanishing. But on a social front, there's something that it is changing. The habits of people are also changing because of the SARS. We saw a key minister, the German government, refusing to shake the chancellor's hand
Right.
because of this. Now, it sounds like an isolated event, but it isn't an isolated event. The way people talk, the way people socialize is going to change. If you look at a situation like, say, in Japan, where all schools have been shut.
Yeah, nobody's going to school until April, at least.
There's a little problem here. In Kenya, it doesn't seem like a big issue because you have house help. In those countries, you actually don't because they're very expensive. Now, labor laws there and labor conditions mitigate against employing someone because you can, but you'd better have a lot of money to pay them. Because minimum wages are taken seriously and they're livable wages, not like ours, which are actually slave wages.
Yeah.
If you consider that now you have a situation with children at home, it means the parents are also going to go at home.
Right, and they need somebody to take care of them.
Yes, if you work in the business, like say in the financial districts where you can do your work online, you won't be interfered with. But if you are in manual labor or your work requires you to physically be in a certain position, you won't have an income because you're not going to work. So you're talking about a situation where the socioeconomic livelihood of most people will be changed, and very many people in places that have been affected and continue to be affected and who are responding to this arguably positively are facing increased poverty levels.
Increased poverty levels, of course. And, you know, we're looking at... We've seen a shutdown in very many places. The conversation continues. We're going to take a break and look at what's happening with the weather right now. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Don't go away. We continue talking about the coronavirus and its effect around the globe and its possible effect in Kenya and what needs to be done to make sure that we have adequate measures in place. The phone lines will be open in a short while and the conversation will continue.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM.
Mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi this morning at 20 degrees. We're going to see some rain showers later on in the day. Take a look into Nakuru at 19 degrees and mostly cloudy as well. Highs of 26 and lows of 15. In Eldoret at 17 degrees. Cloudy conditions this morning. Rain expected later with highs of 24. And then taking a look into Nyeri at 18 degrees. rain showers expected later on as well, with highs of 27 and lows of 15. In Mombasa, currently at 28 degrees, we're going to see some rain showers expected, but mostly cloudy conditions with highs of 33 and lows of 27. And taking a look then into Malindi, it's a warm day there as well, 27 degrees, highs of 32 and lows of 27. Then into East Africa, Dar es Salaam at 28 degrees, cloudy conditions later with a chance of rain with highs of 32 and lows of 25. And then in Kampala at 23 degrees, thunderstorms expected later with highs of 26 and lows of 21. And finally, take a look into Lagos, where light thunderstorms being experienced right now, and that will continue through the day with highs of 34 and lows of 26.
More of the timeless and greatest hits you love. .4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Wherever you're tuned in to us, the live streams are up on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Spice of MKE is how you can watch us and see us in the studio this morning. And we are discussing the coronavirus and where we are this morning as far as certain things are happening. Wherever you are tuned in from, a 94.4 in Nairobi. And looking at things in depth, CT, and of course we've looked at this until now just as a medical issue, but of course we see the numbers today. Imports from China reduced by rather losses as a result of lack of imports from China of 58 billion shillings so far. Looking at schools closing down around the world, looking at countries closing down their borders, and then looking at the social impact of people who depended on, being able to feed people in a certain area, that loss disappearing from them, and saying, okay, what am I actually going to do? And we've seen reports whereby, China, they say the cases have been reducing in terms of infections over the last couple of days. But then what we see is that we see an increase of infections in other countries, from the United States to some countries here on the continent, and asking ourselves, really, are we then able to deal with this? But I think what we will need to look at then is what people should be able to do. And I think one thing that has come about is a panic has arisen because of the fact that very many things are being peddled that are not the truth when it comes to corona. I think we have a duty then to be able to say, actually, this is not the case. We should be able to question, some of the things that we then hear, because this is something that has really epic, gripping proportions where you want to say, we had audio bits doing the rounds yesterday where people was saying things, about, many cases having been, confirmed in Kenya, and people just take it by storm because of the kind of, almost rigid euphoria of this particular disease that we're dealing with. But of course, we still have to be able to question who said this, where did they say it, and if we don't have the concrete answers to that, then we should be able to then easily label it as untrue. And it should be, can we give or apply any kind of authenticity to this? And if we cannot,
actually, the government should take charge of this conversation by letting experts and people who deal with these things.
They should be the ones who should be the authority behind giving information.
Yes, because we have virologists in the University of Nairobi. We have virologists in Kemri. We have virologists in research centers. They understand. And there are people who deal with flus, influenza. They understand. They can give you history. They can tell you what to do. They can tell you how to contain it. They can explain why containment is important. We've had these things from time immemorial. In the 14th century, we had the worst case that you could think of. And the Black Death, as it was called, killed 75 to 200 million people. Now, nothing as bad as that has happened because antibiotics came into being. Penicillin came into being. All these things happened, changes came about. If you follow the changes that came about and the decisions that helped bring about change, they were medical, not political. medical. If politics works in tandem with medical and give the medical fraternity a front seat in this and the louder voice in this, then you will see that policy will work alongside knowledge that can actually bring about change. When you talk about isolation, don't say isolation, word, leave it. Explain what it means. It's called containment. You are ensuring that it doesn't move outside certain boundaries. That's it. And when it doesn't move, then it means the chances of spreading it are limited. So more people being infected is limited. If you look at the drastic action that Saudi has taken, no visas for the Hajj, it's with this understanding. People who are a little careless about it, like Iran, and didn't take the action, now they are claiming more deaths than even China is as a result of that. Just politicians came in, made political statement, minister this, you suddenly find a situation, no. Public gatherings, no problem. What do you have? They didn't contain it because the isolation policy, a simple strategy that is known. This throwing of words at things, Kenya, self-isolate. What does
it actually mean? And I think that this is the thing. The communication needs to be broken down so simply that people really understand then what would happen. Because we're dealing with something that, I mean, are you kidding? In the last 1 week, we have children who are talking about the fact that, children in primary school here, talking about the fact that coronavirus is here with us and we have over 1,000 people infected. Where are they getting this information from? Who is feeding this information? And I need to quarantine. They don't even know how to spell the word. Talk less of then what does it actually mean? And I think there's, again, the government is provided with a unique opportunity to break down this information in terms of what the people need to hear, because we know what the questions are. Are there people in the country who could infect me with it? What do I then need to do to protect myself? And what do I need to do if I come in contact with somebody who, may be presenting some of these symptoms? And I think that is the information that needs to be shared. And I think it needs to be a combination of efforts in terms of making this clear, because we're going to get to the point whereby people will not know what to do. And if we have to deal with that, then we're dealing with dangers untold, unfortunately. And this is the thing. People need to be assured at some level. But at this point, assurance needs to come with the truth. Assurance needs to come with a level of honesty that people are not going to doubt. Because unfortunately, with the messages that we've been seeing coming out, recently, awash on social media, what the danger now that is posed is that if another kind of messaging comes through, you're not then sure which to believe because you don't know what is the case. With what we saw coming out yesterday, if something else came out to counter that, with what we've presented people with, which one are they going to pick up? Of course, the more sensational. But if you had started it and owned the narrative from the very beginning and said, look, this is what we're dealing with, this is what we anticipate, this is what we expect people to do, and come out from that point where you're very clear, whether it is with the little information that you have, serve it up with some clarity, you put people at rest. And this is what needs to happen. But at the same time, I think we also need to come from a point where we're urging people not to just swallow up everything that you get like that. Interrogate it, ask the questions, be very simple. But then, of course, the question then comes up, to whom are we asking the question? At this point, who are we targeting our questions
to? But also of significance, you see, when you talk about isolation, there are other strategies you can use. Now, these have brought about problems, say, in the US, what you call contact tracing, meaning you have this individual, who are the people he would normally engage with? Where does he normally go? Who does he associate with? Now, I'm saying it has brought an issue in the US because now it's us touching on individual rights. And you find airlines are saying you can't go around using this information you have and trying to trace people and their contacts without necessarily understanding how it is you can do this without infringing on their rights. There is a debate that arises from anything such as this one, and that is the debate that the government should take control of through the professionals who understand and know this thing. So that it isn't a free-for-all where everybody and anyone with any idea and who can more or less communicate in a language that is audible and understandable just says what they like. No. They must be able to confound anything that comes out by simply making sure that they consistently update and tell you the truth, tell you what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, repeatedly. So that you know in the morning, this is the message. At lunchtime, this is the message. In the evening, this is the message.
So consistent repetition. Consistent repetition. And this is our stance. This is what we are taking on this.
Yes.
Now, if other questions then do come in, because look, there are things that people are still asking, and it's rife in the media. We have politicians who are still, of course, then asking questions on social media. What exactly happened to the 239 passengers? Are we aware of where they are? Are they quarantined right now, or are we scrambling after them? Could some have left the country? We don't know. And those are questions people want to know, because people are living in a state of fear now and saying, okay, well, what exactly happened? In terms of flights coming to the country, has it been grounded for sure, or are we still, playing around with the possibility that could happen? We saw some very firm statements that came out in terms of, visitors from South Korea and Italy coming into the country. But again, what was it? When they come in, they will be self-quarantined. It didn't say anything. It just seems to be a kind of lackadaisical approach to this thing, whereby some kind of seriousness definitely does need to be applied. And unfortunately, this is what we are faced with. This is what we see to be the reality, that seriousness is not being applied to this, unfortunately.
Why are they focusing on China alone? Are there flights from Japan? Are there flights from Iran?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Now, yes, it has a direct impact on our economy. Yes, it has a problem, but what is your priority? What is the priority? What is it that you want to ensure actually happens? And what is it that you need to do to guarantee the safety of your people? That is the thing that you must do.
That is definitely what needs to be taken into consideration, because at the end of the day, it seems that we're dealing with a lot of diplomacy issues, optics, communication here and there. But at the end of the day, the real middle of it is making sure that the people of this country are protected. CT, before we go into traffic, today's proverb.
Well, this proverb, by the time I'm through with it, I think even someone who didn't want to understand it is going to probably have figured out what it means. The dance of a millipede does not impress the person who has seen the dance of a snake.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We're going to take a look at what's happening on our roads right now and come back and continue with the conversation. The phone lines will be open, 0719 012 600. Let us know what it is that you see. All right, things mostly clear on Mombasa Road this morning, and having a look and saying that Thika Road, yes, no more traffic. It's quite open now. Unfortunately, looking at Kangundo Road now, serious accident at Njiro. One person has lost their life and police already on the scene. And because of that, there is a massive, massive jam. And this is the reason why. Please approach with caution as you do. Because of that accident, the traffic has definitely increased. Getting into the CBD still posing a problem today as you try to get in, not as we would like to see it. Mombasa Road, of course, looking much better. Langata Road easing off as we, of course, now out of traffic hour. Langata Road and Gong Road doing very well right now. Coming out of Westlands, of course, not so much of a problem. Most cars off the road now, and people have reached where they want to go. So we're in a good place right now as concerns the traffic. Y'all have done well this morning, especially for Tuesday morning. If anything else out of the ordinary, do let us know what you see. Spice FM KE 0719 012 600. Give us a call. Let us know, and we'll see how we keep you moving.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
We have a whole list which we can share with you of what has been told to procure. Some of them are masks. As you know, one of the preventive aspects for the coronavirus is to wear a mask. There are various sets of masks, and KEMSA has been told what quantities to purchase. Protective gears, what we call the PPEs. We have also been given the specifications for that. The beds, we have been told the number of beds to procure, 120. The medicines to treat symptomatic conditions or symptoms, that is the products to treat fever, product to treat pneumonia if the patient came in with pneumonia, oxygen, because if you have a respiratory infection and you require to be hospitalized and maybe put in ICU, you may require oxygen.
On coronavirus need to be reported so that we can remove that which has been said in the past that nothing was going on, because the government does not always operate, in public domain. There are so many things happening. There are so many things that have happened in the last few days to do with coronavirus, even at our level. And remember that we are ourselves.
Right. So, of course, we heard coming from the CEO of KEMSA, which is the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, John Mwangi, and him talking about then, what they have been asked to procure.
What on earth was he saying?
This is the thing. I was hoping that you could do a little bit of interpretation.
He held a press conference
to say that they were going to procure some of
Doesn't
these
say?
things.
A list of things they're supposed to procure.
Yeah.
Okay, how is that useful?
Right, the masks and the beds, so that if somebody gets into hospital, this needs to be done. This is joking as it's at its best, I think. And of course, like I said very clearly now, we talked about the fact that when people then open their mouths and require that certain things be done or said, it's probably when we see some kind of attention and people are going to sit up and talk about this. John Mwangi, of course, is responding to the call that came about that certain sectors need to do something about this coronavirus. Okay, responding to this call in this case means that beds need to be procured. So there were no beds in particular facility. The masks need to be procured. I don't know then who's going to use them at the port of entry, at the airport, at medical facilities, etc., etc. This is what then needs to be done. Are we confident? Are you confident that enough is being done to make sure that we are not sitting around with our hands in our laps when something actually does happen? I'm going to open up the phone lines now, 0719-012-600. It would be good for us to hear. Do you feel confident enough that the measures that have been put in place are enough to make sure that we are dealing with this thing in an adequate way, as possible when it comes to measures being put in place? Is enough being done? 0719-012-600. Now, CT, does it matter how many beds or how many masks have been bought? In this case, shouldn't we be, again, I think we should go back to the basic vital communication that needs to be done, making sure that people's lives are essentially being taken care of. In this case, it would seem that is not the priority. That is not the attention that is being placed. It seems that something more absolutely needs to be done. I mean, honestly speaking, where are we?
Let me tell you where we are. An executive order was given last week that an interministerial committee chaired by the Health Cabinet Secretary should have the country ready. Good plan. We saw the group Sunday, good optics, tick, done. What we also know for a fact is that the committee on Sunday resolved to have counties set up emergency centers and monitoring all points of entry, ports, blah, 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 etc. Resolved.
Resolved?
Yes. Now, for this to happen, certain things need to be bought. So we also know the Medical Supplies Authority is yet to receive cash to procure medical essentials and drugs in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. Those are things that we know. So it doesn't matter what else we can discuss here. If we suddenly had an outbreak, in short, we are not ready. Yes.
At the end of the day, we are not ready.
Yes, we are still doing the Kenyan thing of throwing words at the problem. What this gentleman who spoke was essentially telling us, without telling us, he knows what he's supposed to do. That's rich. We also know what he's supposed to do. What we wanted to know is what we have done. And telling us that this is the list of things you need to buy, it's information, yes, but it's not.
It really doesn't concern.
It's useless information. If you are telling us that the centers that have been set up have already been equipped with this, different story. We are being told in this same article on page 4 of 3 of the Sun that I'm reading that even the Bagathi Center, which they spoke of, which was supposed to be one of the key centers, will be ready on Friday.
On Friday, last week.
So between now and then, let's suspend
coming Friday.
Yes,
right.
this coming Friday. Let's suspend anything that has to do with the coronavirus. Coronavirus, listen to us carefully. You are not supposed to do anything until Friday. Because Friday is when we'll be ready for you. Because why is it difficult to say we are not prepared? This is what we have put in place to prepare. And the timetable is as follows. It may not sound pleasant, but there's clarity. There's a timetable. We can say, okay, given the timetable, where are we now? But we are ready. We have facilities. We can quarantine. And then the information that follows thereafter, that proves without a shadow of a doubt
the exact opposite.
Complete and undiluted opposite of what was said. Now, this is what causes consternation.
This is the problem. And this is now, essentially, all this combined is what then causes the panic. I don't really think that there's the panic or fear that this disease exists or that it's spreading around the world. The panic that comes in Kenya at this point, having heard from different people, is that should it then cross over into the borders of this country, we are not then ready to deal with it. I think that is where the fear arises. And I think again, is a unique opportunity to share with people really what is happening. And if really you're at the point where you haven't done anything about it, again, a unique opportunity presents itself for you then to do something about it. Because yes, we know that people are dying from this disease. We also know that people are able to recover from this disease if infected, and then the proper mechanisms put in place, the proper medical attention being given, people have been able to survive this. People have come out of it and have then been cured of this. Because of course it's a virus, it lives out its days, and then you do what you can do to treat the symptoms. But are we going to be able to do that if we have this widespread panic? And then also, then people are asking, then are some of the rumors that they've heard then founded? If you're not able to give a clear-cut course in terms of what people then are able to do, then perhaps this is information that we can pass. Again, opening up the phone line, 0719012600. Are you comfortable in terms of what we've been receiving, in terms of information of what has been done or not done in this case as concerns the coronavirus in measures in this country? Of course, yes, we know that it has not found its way in yet, but with the measures that have been put in place, or in terms of what has been said is going to be done, are people comfortable? And that's the question that we're asking this morning. We're going to hear from Zachary. Zachary, good morning. Hello, Zachary, good morning. Hello. All right. We'll get Zachary to call us back later in a bit, and then we'll see if we can hear from you. Not to get the phone lines are open on 0719-012-600. We'd like to hear from you in terms of what you think. Right. So, I think work needs to be done, but I think it is simple work in this case, as opposed to saying things that we think are going to play to people's emotions, or rather actual work that has been done, actual measures that have been put in place to make sure that this is actually contained.
Why I'm quiet is because on this particular subject, I feel that until and unless we have a situation where this interministerial committee that was set up gives a clear path as to how they've involved Kenya Medical Research Institute, Kenya Medical Association, the body that deals with the Union of Doctors, the body that deals with lab technicians, unless nurses, clinical officers, the entire medical fraternity, unless they tell us how all these people are being involved. Because remember, it is their members who are going to be providing care and treatment in the hospitals.
At the end of the day, yes.
Yes. Unless they tell us how they have managed to put this team together and how they are talking and what they are doing. This is one of those times where you tell us the government is planning, you don't need to know. We do need to know.
People actually
and
do
we
need to know.
We do need to know these things in details, because if we do not, then you are encouraging panic and you are encouraging the sort of fake news that we keep hearing, and it doesn't help. because it distracts one and it also interferes with processes that one could set in place to ensure that should we have a problem, should it occur that we have people who have contracted the coronavirus, we actually know what to do and get it done. So long as there's this vagueness and it's encouraged, then the complete opposite is what will happen. So let this committee get its act together and let it look for the relevant people who can give us better information on a daily basis as to what is being done, how it's being done, county by county, because it said all counties, county by county, and especially those counties that have border points. They must tell us with clarity what it is that is being done. Because remember, we are talking about flights from China being banned. None from Iran have been banned, none from Italy have been banned, none from Japan have been banned. Also, we do not know.
I'm at pains to understand why this is so difficult.
It isn't,
No,
but
I mean,
remember,
because it seems to be so difficult because we're not getting any kind of
Tanzanians,
result.
Ugandans are constantly intermingling, and we do not know what is happening in those countries.
What we saw
What
yesterday,
flights-
in terms of from the reports that the three countries are actually working together to battle this thing, and I don't know
How
what
are they working together?
This is the thing, though. Of course, the question is how are they working together to make sure that something is being done about it? But it doesn't seem like it would be something so difficult. I'm at pains to understand why it is so hard to be able to say, and I think what we saw coming out of The Economist yesterday, that the thing that you can do with this is to be honest about the situation. Have we manned, facilities in 15 counties? Have we done it in 3? Have we done it in 40? Have we done it in all 47? Simple information like that you can tell people. And what you do is that you then sort out this affinity that people then would have for rumor mongering, and you make sure that people are not spreading false information. Because if you don't do that, you leave a vacuum, and people are going to fill up that space with the information that they're able then to create on them or on their own, unfortunately. But why then would it be so difficult? We heard the gentleman who spoke after the one for Kempster saying, please understand that we're only one body. We're not able to do it on our own. And I think that's where we understand that there's a problem here, and that those who should have been involved or should be involved even now, because we still do have some time in this unique situation until we have confirmed cases in this country, we still do have a little bit of time where something can actually be done. And this is the message that we're putting out there. Here, at this point, you need help, say we're not able to because of 1, 2, 3 such other things. Then it will help people to have an understanding. And what you do, even though you've not solved the problem, you calm people down in the sense that now they're able to say, I am actually at peace with what I've seen so far, and somebody's actually doing something to make sure that the job has been done. Without that, we're going to have a bigger problem on our hands.
The example we could give is actually the US. Statements were made to the effect that they were ready, it wasn't a problem, they're looking into it. Now, and then you had one person last week. Now we have 6 people dead. And CDC has tests, has results, they're inconclusive. Health workers are scrambling. The president is meeting with pharmaceutical companies. Suddenly, every activity points to an emergency.
There seems to be an emergency in our hands. We're going to take a break now and continue with the conversation in a short while. After the break, we continue with just this.
Broadcasting worldwide, Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM.
Morning's done right. This is this is Kenya's biggest conversation in the Situation Room this morning. Of course, looking at the coronavirus. Nduoko and CT Muga in the studio today. And here we are asking, the question is, do you feel confident about the measures that have been put in place by government to make sure that, things are in place in case anything actually does happen, and make sure that we are mitigating this. And of course, what is central to this conversation is saying the communication that has been put out there, enough or not enough, CT. Here we are saying, it doesn't seem adequate.
Right now,
at
the
this
cases
point
that have been pointed out as existing in America, from 0 last week, we're now at 100. But what they say is that the case that was found in Washington State, what they're estimating is that this virus has had 6 weeks in which to spread. And they're estimating that probably 1,500 people have been infected or not more. Remember, when we heard of the breakout, the statements coming out of America as reported and recorded were they don't have a problem with it. Almost the point of almost saying it's unlikely we will get it. Now, these are people who have a preparedness. These are people who actually have really seriously functioning healthcare systems. Now, if you're saying that there's an estimate, these are estimated 1,500 people who may have contacted the virus.
Right.
Now, if the case that they found in Washington State last week, and they say the virus may have had a time to spread within 6 weeks, what about the others?
What about the others?
Now, so it's a scenario you need to understand. In a country where preparedness is taken seriously, to one where preparedness is played around with like we have in this country, you don't need 10. 1. From the time the 1 was announced, 6 are now dead. They have CDC. There is hardly any organization on this planet that knows how to handle research, do work on diseases like the CDC. 6 dead.
And they have a handle on things, as it were, from what we see in terms of what they've been able to do. I mean, not just from today, the health system that is impenetrable at some points. They then, in this case, how much more, whereby you say it's health systems with a country like Kenya, where health systems is on its knees at some points, then to say, are we going to be able to deal with anything new with what we have already to deal with? They have seen deaths. They have seen more cases. Of interest,
some of these cases have been residents in a nursing care facility. Yes. So, and this is in a country that understands preparedness, and let me even give the name of the place. It's called Evergreen Health Medical Center in Kirkland, Washington. 2 people have died of coronavirus in this facility. It's a health facility. And they have very high standards of health care. Not to sound alarming, but to sound the truth. The coronavirus is not something you joke with. It isn't one of those situations where we don't have enough maize so you can import it. No. This one, if it lands and people start getting infected, you will have a genuine problem on your hands.
Yeah.
And then you will not know what to do. And how you mitigate is just make sure, don't talk at the problem, provide the solution and tell us, these beds we want to procure. Where are they coming from? We have beds, procure them.
Procure them.
If you need all these things that they're talking about, we have them in country. Masks, they are actually manufactured here. Gloves, we manufacture them here. All these things they're talking about are available locally. If you can't even get something on credit, or your procurement process can't move fast enough in emergency, then the message we are getting is that in this country, If you have an emergency, we are finished.
Well, this is the thing. I think, though, that I think people are still, or we have a lot of sectors operating with the belief that this is not something that's going to cross over to, Kenyan borders anytime soon, and we still have time to be able to deal with it.
People are behaving as though it won't even come
it won't come here.
Sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. People actually have that belief that, we really don't have anything to worry about. Of course, there's a narrative that's being peddled out there that it's not going to affect anybody of dark skin for some reason. And the question has been out there that, coming out from experts, global experts, and they've been saying, why is it that such a disease that has affected so many people has not affected or has not infected anyone of Black African heritage? Why is that the case? Why do we have that? And people want to understand why. But I think this also fuels a narrative that people feel, it's there, it's not here. So in terms of us having to necessarily do anything about it, the time has not come. How do we dissuade people from thinking about this in that manner? To say that, yes, there's something that you need to do to protect yourself, make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, is not of any harm whatsoever. And of course, we're going to go through all the trouble of putting all these measures in place. What if nothing happens? This is the case. The question should be, what if something does happen? And that's how you deal with the disaster or that's how you deal with emergency management.
Even if it happens and you're prepared, what if you have a situation the test kits are flawed? There's a debate that's going on in the US. The test kits that they have from CDC have inconclusive results, which means there's something not right. So you don't really know certain things. And these are people who are, again, I'm repeating, who tend to understand what they're doing with great clarity. Now, we are having a hit and miss situation at the procurement process. Procurement. Yes. This is one of those situations where even before the end of this show, I say I rest my case.
Wait, okay, hold on, CT. That's almost like it's a cliffhanger, right? We're having a problem whereby there's no money to be able to purchase what we need to be adequately ready for corona. For the virus, if it actually does then come and hit in Kenya. There is no money. The availability is not the issue, but availability of funds then is a problem. So across the board, I think that it needs to be clearer. Of course, the president did come out and was saying that, certain things need to be put in place to make sure that we are dealing with this thing adequately. And there was a directive, committee formed, etc., etc. But if you have no fuel to move this vehicle, then where are we going? And is that the case? If we have no fuel to move this vehicle, are we going to be able to move? We can't move. We really can't move.
Look, if you want a situation that can be stabilized, just like VCT came into being and was volunteering, counseling and testing, you could go to get tested because test kits were available. One of the things that places like the US have done, and CDC produced kits, and why issues or flaws could be found was that they took them out to the States and people could go and get tested. Not people who are not asymptomatic, they're not even showing signs, but they got tested just to know. With any infection, it is known that if you catch it early, then chances of mitigating against it are higher. So get tested so that you know. We are not being told, but it is true that many people who are infected do not die. In fact, the death rate is like at 1%. And we also know that children under the age of 5 are likely to die if they get infected, and people who are over the age of 60 also run that risk. That is the reality of these situations. But these things must be told. Remember, with HIV, you be told you are likely to get it if you do this, the other, and the other. And this is what's likely to happen. So get tested. I don't know the story about test kits in this country. I don't know. I don't know whether we have them. I don't know the numbers we have. And I don't know where they're stationed. And I don't know whether people can volunteer to be tested. I don't know. And if people aren't being tested, then you're saying you're waiting for people to exhibit signs.
This is the thing.
Yes. Then you've opened a whole new Pandora's box, because it then means that this person, you have to figure out, that's what you call contact tracing. Who have they been in contact with from the time? Because they're now exhibiting. And do you want a second and third person to show signs before you can determine what to do? Ideally, this is where prevention is actually better than cure. You are better off finding a situation where you can actually be testing people so that you know ahead of time. Yes.
What the situation is.
It is in your interest.
Well, in this case, it's clear that those, of course, around the world, nobody really knew what to do because this is, yes, a novel disease. And it's at this point we say that it's okay. The all-knowing, sectors at this point would need help. And we're passing out this information at this point that, communication is key, number one. Don't tell people about something that you're going to do if you're actually not going to do it. And I don't think that we can say because it's not here, we don't necessarily need to do anything about it. We need to do something about it in the time that it is not here, so that it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when, so that when it eventually then does cross over into Kenya, we're adequately prepared to have done something about it, and so that we don't throw ourselves into a tailspin and have ourselves running after ourselves, now looking for a solution whereby the solution could have been met before this thing actually hit. The conversation continues, and of course we see that around the world more and more infected cases are being told of, more deaths that we've seen coming out of the US. Coronavirus is here. The conversation does continue, and of course our voices need to be heard when it comes to things that need to be done and put in place to make sure that we don't suffer consequences that are not necessary. So of course we're coming to the end of the show, and at this point today's proverb, CT, where you're going to unpack this for us.
Well, before I unpack it, let me say this. One of the things that you also need to know is that we talk about droplets, whether it is saliva, whether it is mucus, whether it is your sweat. And people don't want to ask the question, but it must be asked. If somebody touches, say, the surface of a seat in a bus, or one of those pools that we hold in the bus, or in a place that you sit in, or even a table in a restaurant, yes, you're told that the virus has a shelf life of 2 hours, well, up to even 9 days.
9 days.
Now, that is something you need to know. But what you also need to know is that if you use what we know as the common disinfectants, these antibacterials that are normally used for washing hands and cleaning hands, yes, they do help. They do help. And if you keep cleaning your hands and washing them with those sanitizers, so to speak, yes, you do provide yourself with a serious safety net. Okay. The dance of a millipede does not impede the person who has seen the dance of a snake. To put it really simply, what this means is that if you expand your horizons and you expand your store of knowledge, then you'll have great understanding. And when you do, then you can have what you call a perspective. If you understand, for instance, what the virus is all about, how it is infected, how it is caused, then you will also know how you can prevent yourself from being infected by it. That is broadening your horizon. If you don't, then in that case, you will consider the dance of the millipede to be the most wonderful thing you've ever seen, because you will not have seen the dance of the snake.
Right. Without having seen something even more spectacular or more glorious. Opening our horizons, continuing with the conversation. This has been Kenya's biggest conversation right here in the Situation Room. CT, do say goodbye.
Goodbye. And may the conversation continue.
And may the conversation continue. It does continue tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Understandably, as we go through the day, Spice Soul continues, and up until 3 o'clock, where Monique will take over and take you home with the Spice Drive. The adults in the room come in later on in the afternoon from 7 to 10 p.m. with Eric, Emmanuel, and Barbara, the Duchess of Ikolomani. Enjoy the rest of the day. Keep it Spice FM. We'll keep talking tomorrow morning. Until then, do take care of yourselves, and remember